Madam Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Clerk. Good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council are in attendance and all members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video conference, and town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For the members of public that are watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I'm going to now call this meeting to order. This is a public meeting, and we will be following our typical format for public meetings tonight. First, we will be receiving a presentation from staff, followed by a question and answer from council. Then we will open up the meeting to delegations from the public in attendance, after which we will hear comments from the applicants, and council will then have an opportunity to ask any final questions and make comments before considering any motion on the application. Does any member of council have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I need a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting for June 7th. Councillor Bauer, Councillor Khan, all in favor? Thank you. I am going to turn the meeting over now to Bruno. I cannot say your last name, so I'm sorry for the informal introduction, but I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bruno Scopacasa, Senior Planner for the Town of Ajax. Tonight's presentation will provide an overview of staff's report for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications submitted by Medallion Development Castlefields Limited for lands located on the north side of Rosland Road between the Carruthers Creek and Audley Road. The presentation will offer an overview of the site, a brief history of the existing Castlefield subdivision, policies governing development of the subject lands, analysis of the proposed master plan, an overview of Planning Act Section 37 community benefits, staff's recommendations, and an explanation of the planning process moving forward. The applicant has appealed the applications to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Therefore, Council must provide direction to staff and its solicitor on how to proceed at future matters of the appeal. The official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications are for the subject lands outlined in red on this image. The subject lands represent the last 4 undeveloped blocks within the Castlefield subdivision and have a total area of approximately 4.4 hectares or 10.9 acres. The subject lands are surrounded by the following land uses. To the north is the Castlefields residential subdivision consisting of single and semi-detached residential dwellings, community parks, and a future school site. Immediately to the east is Audley Road North. Across Audley Road North are lands designated rural area that are part of the Greenbelt. Immediately to the south is Rosland Road East. Across Rosland Road East is the Sundial Mulberry Meadows subdivision consisting of single and semi-detached dwellings, back-to-back and street townhouses, community parks, and an elementary school. Immediately to the west is a stormwater management pond and the Carruthers Creek and associated valley lands that are designated environmental protection. In 1998 and 1999, Medallion filed a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications to permit the development of the Castlefield subdivision located at the northwest quadrant of Rosland Road and Audley Road. The proposal included approximately 850 single and semi-detached dwelling units, as well as the future development of 203 block townhouses or apartments on lands between Rosland Road in Carberry, Mansbridge, Styles, and Whitlock Crescents, from the Carruthers Creek tributary to the west and Audley Road to the east, along with park blocks, a school block, and public roads. The Castlefields draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications were approved by Council in 2002. Medallion purchased the 40-acre parcel of land south of the railway corridor, west of Audley Road, known as Omelchuk, and incorporated these lands into the balance of the Castlefield subdivision through the submission of separate draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications. The proposal for these lands included approximately 135 single-detached homes. The subdivision and rezoning applications were approved by Council in 2003. The initial submission of the development applications being discussed tonight were designed to facilitate the future development of the subject lands for 1,359 residential rental apartment units within one 14-story building, 5 8-story buildings, and 64 townhouse dwellings. A standalone 1,390 square meter commercial building, underground parking, and a small surface parking area. Since the initial submission, staff have communicated various concerns with the proposal to the applicant. The applicant has responded to these concerns by revising the proposal in the following manner. By including a 0.96 hectare or 2.4 acre park block, by reducing the number of buildings from 6 to 5, by relocating commercial space at grade within one of the 8-story apartment buildings, and by reducing the number of units from 1,359 to 1,304. Therefore, the current proposal is designed to facilitate the future development of the subject lands for 1,304 residential rental apartment units within a 15-story apartment building located in Block A, 3 8-story apartment buildings located in Blocks B, C, and D, 1 8-story mixed-use rental apartment building with 950 square meters of ground floor commercial space located in Block E, 53 apartment townhouse dwellings located in Blocks A through D, underground parking, and a small surface parking area. The Provincial Policy Statement, also referred to as the PPS, provides policy direction on matters of provincial interest related to land use planning and development. It encourages efficient development patterns that optimize the use of land, resources, public investment in infrastructure, and public service facilities, and promotes a mix of housing options and alternative transportation choices, such as active transportation and transit. Given the PPS direction, there are a number of applicable policies which are highlighted here that govern the development of the subject lands, such as accommodate an appropriate, affordable, and market-based range and mix of residential types, employment, recreation, park and open space, and other uses to meet long-term needs. Promote the integration of land use planning, growth management, transit supportive development, intensification, and infrastructure planning to achieve cost-effective development patterns, optimization of transit investments, and standards to minimize land consumption and service costs. Land use patterns within settlement areas shall be based on densities and a mix of land uses which are an efficient use of land and resources, support active transportation, and are transit supportive. Encourage compact mixed-use development that incorporates compatible employment uses, and promote a land use pattern, density, and mix of uses that minimize the length and number of vehicle trips, and support current and future use of transit and active transportation. The proposed development applications are consistent with the PPS as they will facilitate the future development of the subject lands that is an efficient, compact development and appropriate land use along an arterial road and transit route. Provides a mix of more affordable housing, employment, and parkland. Is a cost-effective development pattern and minimizes land consumption and servicing costs. Is an efficient use of existing and future infrastructure, as Rosland Road East is scheduled to be widened to a 4-lane urban cross-section. Is transit supportive where transit exists on Rosland Road East, and supports active transportation by placing future residents in close proximity to existing and future trails and multi-use paths, as well as including commercial uses within the development. In addition, the PPS clearly stipulates Council's decision on planning matters shall be consistent with the PPS. A growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe provides a long-term framework for managing growth in order to implement Ontario's vision for building stronger and prosperous communities. The growth plan provides policy direction and establishes minimum intensification and density targets, directs growth to settlement areas, and prioritizes intensification. Given the growth plan's direction, there are a number of applicable policies, which are highlighted here, that govern the development of the subject lands, such as support a full range of housing to accommodate a range of incomes and household sizes, support climate change mitigation by minimizing land consumption through compact built form, that multi-unit residential developments incorporate a mix of unit sizes to accommodate a diverse range of household sizes and incomes, supports active transportation, encourages the integration and sustained viability of transit services, and achieves a minimum density target of 50 residents and jobs combined per hectare measured over the entire designated greenfield area. The proposed development applications conform with the growth plan, as they will facilitate the future development of the subject lands that provides residential intensification along a local corridor that is an efficient use of land and will support the viability of transit services along Rosland Road. Provides a different and more affordable housing tenure within the community that will serve various incomes and ages of households. Integrates development with investment in infrastructure, as Rosland Road East is scheduled to be widened to a 4-lane urban cross-section. Supports the achievement of complete communities by incorporating commercial uses and providing additional parkland, and supports active transportation by placing future residents in close proximity to existing and future trails and multi-use paths, as well as including commercial uses within the development. Similar to the PPS, the growth plan clearly stipulates Council's decision on planning matters must be consistent with the growth plan. The subject lands are designated living areas in the Durham Region Official Plan. Living areas are to be predominantly used for housing purposes and developed in a compact form through higher densities and by intensifying and redeveloping existing areas, particularly along arterial roads. Rosland Road is designated a Type B arterial road and identified as a regional transit spine in the Durham Region Official Plan. The Durham Region Official Plan policies indicate that development adjacent to transit spines must provide complementary higher density and mixed uses, where buildings are oriented towards the street, supports non-auto modes of transportation, and limits surface parking. The proposed amendment to increase the permitted density will achieve the overall regional gross density of 50 residents and jobs per net hectare required in greenfield areas. The proposed amendment is consistent with the policies of the Durham Region Official Plan. The subject lands are designated high and medium density residential and are subject to Area-Specific Policy 6.2 of the town's official plan. The high-density residential designation permits stacked townhouses, low-rise apartments, and other forms of multiple unit housing within a density range of between 60 to 185 units per net hectare. The minimum building height is 4 stories and the maximum is 15 stories. The medium density residential designation permits single and semi-detached dwellings, duplex, triplex, and fourplex dwellings, street and stacked townhouse dwellings, low-rise apartments within a density range of 30 to 75 units per net hectare. The minimum building height is 3 stories and the maximum is 6 stories. Rosland Road is a local corridor, therefore official plan info policies for lands along corridors are applicable. These policies allow buildings in the medium density residential designation to be developed up to 8 stories in height. In order to facilitate the future development of the subject lands, the applicant is requesting that the Town of Ajax official plan be amended to increase the maximum permitted density from 185 to 660 units per net hectare on lands designated high-density residential on Block A, to increase the maximum permitted density from 75 to an average of 317 units per net hectare on lands designated medium-density residential on Blocks B, C, and D, to increase the maximum permitted density from 75 to 350 units per net hectare on lands designated medium-density residential on Block E, to permit high-rise apartments and multiple attached dwellings with a minimum height of 3 stories on lands designated high-density residential on Block A, to permit mid-rise apartments and multiple attached dwellings with a minimum height of 3 stories on lands designated medium-density residential on Blocks B to D, to permit the proposed commercial space and to redesignate a portion of the subject lands from medium-density residential to open space. The subject lands which are outlined in red on this image are zoned Residential Multiple 6 Zone, or RM6, and Neighborhood Commercial Zone, or NC, and are subject to Exception 76 within the town zoning bylaw. The RM6 zone permits multiple attached dwellings or townhouses to a maximum height of 11 meters. Exception 76 permits the additional use of apartment buildings with a minimum building height of 6 stories and a maximum density of 60 units per net hectare. The NC zone permits the uses of a convenience store, daycare facility, dry cleaning depot, financial institution, laundromat, library, office, personal service shop, and service and repair shop. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment, provided in attachment 2 of the staff report, is designed to implement the development proposal by rezoning lands for the proposed park block and the mixed-use building on Block E, establishing the maximum density for Blocks A through to E, permitting multiple attached or block townhouse dwellings, and establishing various development standards, including reducing the required minimum parking supply. The master concept plan illustrates that the future development will adhere to official plan policies that require mitigation of high-density developments, adverse impacts on adjacent low-density development. The high and mid-rise buildings have been located along Rosland Road East, furthest away from the existing 2-story residential dwellings located on the north side of Carberry, Mansbridge, Styles, and Whitlock Crescents. Attention has been given to street frontages by predominantly locating parking underground, with parking entrances incorporated within building facades or internal to the site, served by internal private roads. This will reduce vehicular and pedestrian conflicts and create a streetscape that is focused on the pedestrian realm. Surface parking associated with Block E, designed to serve the commercial uses on the ground floor of the building, is located behind the building, reducing the visual impact from the public streets. The proposed development has been divided into walkable block sizes, which tie into the local street network. Vehicular access to blocks A and B is proposed from Rushworth Drive, and to blocks C to E from Hilton Gate and Audley Road North. Additional right-in and right-out access driveways are proposed off of Rosland Road East between blocks D and E and Audley Road North to Block E. A number of pedestrian routes are proposed, connecting pedestrians to the multi-use path on Rosland Road East and the existing Castlefields neighborhood to the north. Official plan policy requires high and mid-rise buildings to be below a 45-degree angular plane measured from the nearest low-density residential properties. In this case, that would be from the properties located along the north side of Carberry, Mansbridge, Styles, and Whitlock Crescents, and for Block E, the residential properties located on the south side of Whitlock Crescent. These cross-sections illustrates compliancy with this policy, where the dashed line illustrates the 45-degree angular plane. The 45-degree angular plane is a common design guideline used by numerous municipalities to create an appropriate transition in building scale and allow for sufficient sunlight to reach the streetscape. These cross-sections illustrate this transition in height from the buildings located along Rosland Road East by stepping back the north side of the buildings and locating 3-story townhouses across from the existing 2-story low-density residential dwellings. The tall and mid-rise buildings are located approximately 46 meters or 151 feet from the low-rise residential lots located on the north side of Carberry, Mansbridge, Styles, and Whitlock Crescents. The visual scale and massing of the tall and mid-rise buildings are proposed to be reduced through the implementation of various 2-meter facade stepbacks and the use of various materials, colors, and/or textures to reduce the building's visual scale and massing. The tall building will become lighter in materials as it advances through the upper portion of the building. The proposed 3-story townhouses are located along the north end of the subject lands. This is designed to appropriately transition the scale of the development moving north towards the existing low-rise residential dwellings located north of the subject lands. The townhouses are proposed as double-fronted units with balconies and landscaped yards. The townhouse units are designed without integrated garages or driveways. All parking for units within the buildings and townhouses are proposed to be located underground, except for the surface parking behind the building in Block E that will serve the commercial space located at grade of this building. The focal point of the proposal is a 0.96 hectare or 2.38 acre park block. The park block will front onto Rosland Road East, Hilton Gate, and Styles Crescent, which will expose the park to the proposed and existing residential areas, making the park easily accessible and visible from the streets. A park facility fit plan was prepared by the applicant to demonstrate how this park block could be designed. The park facility fit plan provides for a children's playground, basketball court, pickleball courts, fitness stations, fenced-in dog run area, picnic and multi-purpose areas, seating areas, and walkways. The ultimate design of the park block will be carried out by the town with engagement from the community. The park will provide a significant community benefit to the existing and future residents in the surrounding neighborhoods. Section 37 of the Planning Act, also referred to as density bonusing, allows municipalities to secure facilities, matters, or services, more commonly referred to as community benefits, as a condition of the approval of rezonings for increases in building height and/or density above existing planning permissions, provided that there are related official plan policies in place. Section 7.1.2 of the town's official plan provides the applicable policies summarized in Section 3.6 of the staff report. Discussions regarding community benefits are ongoing between staff and the applicant. The community benefits being discussed are the construction costs of the proposed park block, the construction cost of a splash pad within the Castlefields Park, a trail connection through the Castlefields woodlot between the Snowling Trail and Audley Road North multi-use path, additional trail connections to the existing trail located between the Castlefield subdivision and the Carruthers Creek, tree planting in town-identified areas within the Castlefield subdivision, the cost of public art within the proposed park block, the construction cost of a pedestrian bridge over the Carruthers Creek north of the railway corridor, and cricket field infrastructure within Imagination Park. The community benefits will be secured through an agreement between the town and the applicant. Staff have reviewed the applications in depth and are of the opinion that the proposed development provides for residential intensification in a compact urban form along an arterial road, will utilize existing and planned area infrastructure, supports the achievement of complete communities by incorporating commercial uses and providing additional parkland, is transit supportive and encourages active transportation, is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan, both of which prescribe municipalities to support developments of this nature, conforms with the region's official plan goals, objectives, and policies, and conforms with the intensification and infill policies in the town's official plan. Given the foregoing, and with considerable consultation with the public and careful consideration of residents' concerns of the proposal, staff are recommending that Council advise the Ontario Land Tribunal that, subject to the applicant providing Section 37 benefits to the satisfaction of the town will not object to the development applications. A second case management conference, also known as a pre-hearing, has been scheduled for October 15th. The primary objective of this hearing will be to identify interested parties, establish an issues list, and to schedule a hearing. Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. I'm going to move first to Regional Council.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bruno, for your presentation, and thank you to everybody watching tonight. Just my first preamble would ultimately be, this is probably the largest development that this council, and I would even argue last term's council, would have to deal with in terms of the amount of building density that we are talking about. So we don't take that lightly under any circumstances. Bruno, I was wondering if you could walk me through the chronology. So we've been hearing from residents of the open houses that when they first bought their units 15, 17 years ago, it was this land was advertised as townhouses. So I'm assuming at one point there would have been an open house to discuss the changing of the OPA or the provincial plan. When did that notification go out? When did the town change from like allowing townhouses to all of a sudden any sort of medium or high density in that area?
Well, that choice was Medallion's choice. My understanding is at the sales office at the time units were sold in the Castlefield subdivision, what was being advertised or shown as the future development of these lands were for executive townhouses. And obviously they never were built. Medallion has changed their views of how these lands should be developed. And they submitted an application in 2017 to move that process forward through the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications that we're dealing with tonight. Medallion originally reached out to the public about 2 years ago, actually more than 2 years ago, because it was pre-COVID, to host their own public meeting to introduce the development proposal to residents. So that was the first time that residents were reached out to present their development proposal. And back in January of this year, we had 3 public open houses that were hosted by the town to get an opportunity for residents to see the proposal and provide any comments or concerns to staff and council members that attended those public open meetings.
So in terms of density, just want to clarify, are we saying that since the lands were built upon, that section was always allowed for medium and high density?
Yes, the official plan policies for that permit high and medium density on the lands have been in place for a number of years. They've actually were in place at the time our first official plan was put in place in 2000. Now the density ranges have changed slightly over the years as we have done official plan reviews of our official plan. So they have adjusted, but the high and medium density designations have been in place for many years.
Were there any staff at the Medallion open house?
I was there, I attended. I know the mayor attended. I'm not too sure if anyone else did. But
and approximately how many people attended? How many residents attended that open house, do you think?
I would say at least 40 to 50 residents easily.
Great. I was wondering if you could walk through. So this was originally submitted in 2017. It's now 2021. What took this approval process so long to get to this point?
Well, there's ebbs and flows when reviewing an application. Initially, when it was submitted, it was deemed incomplete because there were a number of supporting material that the town requested that didn't come in initially. So until those items are provided, we don't start the review process. So that took some time. And then there's, comments and concerns that are relayed back to the applicant. And it also takes some time for their consultants that are working on the project to address those concerns, revise reports, and then submit them again for review by the municipality. Like you said, this is a very extensive proposal when it comes to development, one of the largest that we've had to manage over the last number of years. So an application of this nature doesn't get reviewed overnight very quickly.
But on the inverse of that, it seems like we are being asked to make a decision relatively quickly. And that's because of the Ontario Land Tribunal and the CMC that's before us. So I was wondering, for those residents who may not understand, and I've gone over this many times, I'm still not fully sure I understand sometimes, how do we get to this process with the Ontario Land Tribunal? We've approved other developments, Finley Burton, etc. And I don't remember ever being in a CMC position before we even made, as a council, a decision. So I'm wondering, how do we get to this point?
So Medallion appealed these applications back in 2017. It was an appeal that was filed at the time when the Ontario Municipal Board was in place. And the reason why they filed the appeal was so that if they were to ever proceed to an appeal and a hearing, it would fall under the old OMB rules and procedures. So they're basically, holding their spot under the old rules. Since then, the OMB has shifted to the LPAT, the Local Planning Tribunal, and then from there now to the Ontario Land Tribunals. So it's changed a few times in name, and some of the rules and procedures have changed along with that. But what happened in this past summer, the Ontario Land Tribunal decided to clean up some of their backlogged appeals that were kind of sitting idle. And they notified both the town and the appellant, Medallion, that they have gone ahead and scheduled a CMC, which is a pre-hearing. And they basically told both the town and Medallion that, this is happening on this date. It's not being rescheduled. Please be there. So the appeal process and the pre-hearing was forced upon us by the Ontario Land Tribunal. It was not a request by Medallion or the town.
You can obviously understand the frustration the residents have in that, again, we are being held to rules that other residents with their issues with their developments weren't encountering, notwithstanding COVID and the virtual format that we're doing now, where this would normally be in person. So I can't stress enough like how unfair this process is in terms of speeding through a decision. This council has to make a decision before October 15th. Otherwise, we are going to go to that CMT meeting or CMC meeting in a sense without a final decision, which they've asked for. So my point ultimately is just it's a very unfair process because this Ontario government has arbitrarily decided we want to clear through our books over an appeal that the town didn't ask for, the residents didn't ask for. So again, we've had plenty of time to look into this, and now we're being rushed to an answer. But that's more of a comment. I apologize. This is for questions. Before I kind of go into some of my macro issues, a few on the micro. So the presentation had said that the townhouses would not have above ground parking. Is that correct? It'd be all below ground?
Correct. Yes. The townhouses don't have integrated garages or driveways. Their parking will be situated in the underground parking.
And based on, I know there's not a final plan yet, but are these 2-3 bedroom townhouses?
My understanding, speaking with the applicant, that they would be 2 to 3 bedroom townhouses.
And
those details haven't been finalized yet.
Of course. But ultimately, based on this proposal, a 3-bedroom townhouse, for example, would still be at the mercy of the one parking spot per unit, correct? An entire townhouse would only be considered one unit, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I mean I'm gonna come back to that in a second. And then the park space. So the new park that they want to build in the middle. You said it was 2.88 hectares. Did I get that?
0.96 hectares.
0.96.
2.38 acres.
So in terms of reference for residents who live in this subdivision, there's a park just in the middle, north, right off of Styles. How big is that park for reference?
It's slightly bigger. It's at 1.2 hectares, I believe. Okay. You're talking about the Castlefields Park, correct?
That's right. That's right.
With the soccer pitch?
That's the one.
Yes.
So the park that is currently there is going to be bigger than the park that will be built for these 1,300 plus residents, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So just for council's benefit, a lot of my issues fall under 4 categories. It's transit, traffic, parking, and safety. So I'm going to go into parking first and just ask Bruno a few questions based on that. And park is a big one. We updated our parking bylaw and we're getting a lot of feedback from residents based on not having enough space, which is a very reasonable ask. But so far as, parking demands in Ajax residential neighborhoods have been on the rise for several years and can be largely attributed to increased vehicle ownership rates and provincial trends to develop higher density residential communities. The increased supply of vehicles and reduced supply of parking spaces in these communities has resulted in a scenario where property owners are often forced into finding alternative solutions for parking their vehicles. In some cases, residents have turned to parking their vehicles on the street, which can result in issues such as traffic congestion, winter road maintenance problems, as well as visibility and general safety hazards. Now, I didn't make that quote up. That quote's actually from our planners from our community affairs and planning meeting in January 2021. This is from our own planners. So I don't understand how we could possibly accept bringing down the 1.5 spaces per unit to 1. And in some cases, it's going to be could be a 3-bedroom townhouse with only 1 car. And we don't think that there's going to be any sort of overflow issues. So I was wondering if you could speak to that, Bruno, just like how can we as a council be okay bringing down from 1.5 to 1 spots when our development as is, whether it's Castlefields or South Ajax, doesn't matter. It seems like there are more cars than spaces available. And what we're doing now by approving this will be approving even less spaces for 1,304 units.
If I could, Bruno, jump in here and address Councillor Lee's question about the parking report. We have to understand that parking report was related to low density, single detached residential development and was also coincidental into, boulevard, how the boulevards and whatnot were treated. So I wouldn't say that this is a direct apples to apples comparison. It's definitely a conversation about parking. And this type of development requires less parking in our experience. And that rate that's being put forward is something that would be supported from a planning perspective. I just want to make sure that the report that you're speaking to, Councillor Lee, that is under a low density single detached dwelling conversation, talking about providing for more parking on those types of scenarios as opposed to this high and medium density type of development. So I think that's just so we got that in the right lane. But yes, it's always a challenge. Parking's always a challenge. There's a balance that we have to try to achieve when we're dealing with these types of developments. Definitely developments along corridors like Rosland Road, major arterial roads. This is where the density should happen. This is where the bus goes. This is where commercial development occurs. If you look at Rosland Road across the region as a whole, got a whole mixed bag of uses along there, institutional, residential, got regional headquarters, we got fire halls, we got a whole bunch of things that are along Rosland Road, depending on what municipality you're in. So there's a range there, but I'll just leave that there with regards to the parking.
I guess I understand.
I just want to add another note.
Please.
Is that we're dealing with rental versus ownership here. Typically, rental units don't have a demand at the level that's the same as ownership when it comes to owning a home. So typically, the demand for parking is much less with rental units. Medallion's also proposing through their traffic report to reduce the demand for parking by introducing, bicycle parking and other sort of mechanisms to get people out of their cars and use other modes of transportation. The other component here too is that these are rental units, and when a tenant approaches Medallion to rent a unit and they are told there's only 1 parking space available for them, and they have 2 or more cars, then it becomes obvious to the potential tenant that this is not a development for their lifestyle. And there's a direct correlation between providing a lot of parking and it generating more traffic. So we're trying to find a balance here, right? Between, mitigating the volumes of traffic and not, making that worse by providing so much parking that it now makes it attractive to people that have 2 or more cars.
I get, no, I'm sorry. Like, I don't, even, like this idea that renters have less cars. I'm not sure like where that study comes from. It wasn't really referenced in this report, but I'm going to grant you that premise. But I'm also going to grant you that, we're being told there's a huge demand for housing, right? Almost to the point where it's like a desperation. And I would argue that if someone is desperate just to get a roof over their head, they don't care if they have 2 or 3 cars. They just want a roof over their head. They'll deal with everything else afterwards. And my thing is, I want you to show me a single 3 bedroom townhouse in Ajax that only has 1 car. And I guarantee you, out of all 3 bedroom townhouses in Ajax, that'd be a very small percentage. And I can't stress enough, I don't think we have enough parking. And then it leads me to, Jeff had brought Director Romanowski had brought up active transportation and bike racks. Well, great, but it's not like we have a lot of bike tracks on Rosland right now. Like even the expansion, I don't think there's gonna be a bike lane on Rosland. Maybe I'm incorrect. Is there going to be dedicated bike lanes on Rosland?
Yes, there will, through the chair to Councillor Lee. Yes,
Okay.
there will be lanes and paths and trails, all interconnecting with our other bike infrastructure within the town.
And do we feel that, like realistically speaking, people will now be biking to the GO train from where we are? Because it's not a close bike. I mean, I don't ride a bike. Everyone, that's the biggest joke on council. I don't ride a bike at all. But even I would suggest that not many people in my development now, and I live in Castlefields, is currently biking to the GO station. And so what we're saying is when we build this, all these bikers will come with it. And I don't see the evidence that suggests that.
I'm not going to get into a debate about active transportation
Sure.
and parking and the need for it. And it's chicken and egg type of discussion. The principle of active transportation is to put these programs in place and provide those areas for people to store their bikes so that if they realize that it actually only takes them 12 minutes to ride their bike to the GO train station from Rosland and Salem, and it's not a 45-minute adventure, and they do it once, they might do it again and then tell a friend, and then they ride together, and then you build it's more of a movement than it is anything else. But you have to put the infrastructure and the elements in place in order to promote it and support it and establish it, like building trails and bike lanes and these other connections like bridges over creeks that keep people off the roads. So yes, the ultimate goal is to get people out of their vehicles and onto the Pulse and onto other ride shares or riding their bikes or walking. And that is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal of mine as a planner would be not to need parking, and we use it for other things that are more sustainable and help reduce our heat island, and people take transit and use that. But that's a utopian dream of mine right now. And, it might not happen or be realized for beyond this planning horizon. It's now a 30-year planning horizon. It might be longer than that, but I would hope that we would get there within the next 10 or 15 years where that modal split will change and people will realize driving is not good, and a privilege isn't to have a vehicle at like 18 because you have your driver's license. There's, other things like maintaining good health and reducing pollution and doing all those green things that are important. I'm a bit on my soapbox here, but I want to make sure that we stay focused on the application that's in front of us and the discussions around the issues of density and whatnot that have been raised through this process.
And I appreciate your passion on the subject. I don't disagree. It would be a utopia and I'd be all for it. I don't see anything that shows that we're headed to that direction. So I went from parking. My next issue is transit. In this ideal world that Medallion's building in this development, we're hoping that more people take transit, right? So I guess the question is, do the town planners right now see a horizon where, basic destinations like Durham College, U of T Scarborough, or the Ajax GO station, that these these trips will be reduced by the time we add on 1,304 residents. Because right now, if I leave at 7 a.m., it takes me 30 minutes to get to Ajax Go, 60 minutes to Durham College, and 45 minutes to U of T Scarborough. That's one way. So what we're saying is these rental residents, are willing to add an hour and a half commute to take transit, and that's even before you get to a TTC, for example. Just like those are just three things I timed out. So I'm just like, do we have evidence that DRT is going to expand to accommodate faster routes, or this is just like a hope for our planning department?
If I may answer that to Regional Councillor Lee, yes, we do. The region, or Durham Region Transit, has identified Rosland Road as a priority corridor. They're looking at increasing service to 10-minute headways. We all know that they are in the process of planning the Durham Region Scarborough Bus Rapid Transit Way, which is on Kingston Road, which will be connected via a bus route from this area. I would also say that residents if residents move into these apartments, I think this hope of council would be also that they find jobs in Ajax. I know this council is pushing made in Ajax jobs, and we don't want to rely on our residents leaving to U of T Scarborough or Durham College or to the GO station. Perhaps they could work at Amazon, which is across the street, or other large scale developments that are coming along, office developments, and therefore could rely on active transportation or bus connections that would be much shorter in terms of length, and not rely on those out of our municipality, to have a job. So I think those improvements are in place, and coupled with more jobs in Ajax, I think we do have a solution and a way that these residents can live in these proposed buildings.
And again, I think it's very idealistic for us to aim for that, but the reality is, I think I was on the planning committee where it was I think over 80% of residents commute outside of Ajax to go to work. And I'm trying to work with a realistic number when considering this application, because you can't just work with these like pie in the sky hopes and dreams. And then, because what happens is in 20 years, if they don't come to fruition, then, God willing, we won't be around, on council anymore to really have that. But again, I have a kid, we have people have grandkids in Ajax, and they want to just have a lasting system in place that is realistic. So which leads me now to my next issue, and I'm almost done. I thank you, council, for this indulgence, is traffic. Right now, I live right on Rushworth. I live on 23 Rushworth. Everyone in the development knows that, and now everyone in Ajax knows that. But I live right off of where the pictures are of where the exit's going to be, and that's one light for the entire development. Right? I want people to understand that there's only one lit exit for the entire development. The development on top of us, off of Audley and Taunton, where I used to live, there's two lights, one on Williamson, one on Warner. I just adding on a minimum, and I truly think it's a minimum of 1,304 vehicles. And the new Amazon light that was built there, which is between Salem and Rushworth, and any sort of proposed construction on Rushworth, as well as any construction that this development has. Like, I feel like there's not really proper planning to move residents in and out of this development.
So to respond to your question, Regional Councillor Lee, absolutely, there'll have to be a phased approach to this proposed development, as outlined in the traffic study that they have submitted. The traffic generated from the proposed development really can only proceed. The first phase of 357 units could proceed now, and there's sufficient capacity on the network under existing conditions. And then they will rely on the Rosland Road widening, the proposed Rosland Road widening, which will bring increased capacity to the network and improvements to the Rushworth intersection, the Hilton Gate intersection, and see general improvements of traffic flow in the area. And that only at that time could they proceed with their future phases. I would also say that or remind both yourself and all of council, that we are at the official plan and zoning or the official plan amendment stage. They are still required to submit site plan applications, and they will do that for each block. And one of the things they will do specifically for the future blocks is they will have to reconfirm traffic conditions. They will have to confirm that what was proposed before or as part of this application remains true. So they will, they will retest traffic patterns. They will reconfirm traffic numbers. And should any other improvements be identified at those future stages, town staff will ensure that they are put in place. That is our job. That is what we are here to do is ensure we have an appropriately functioning network. And so this is not, tonight, or if this development is approved to proceed, this is not a blanket approval for all development for an indefinite amount of time. There will be checks and balances along the way, and traffic will be one of the biggest ones, absolutely. And we will be watching and monitoring and doing our own data collection and review to ensure that what we're being presented is in line with what we are seeing as well.
I can just speak anecdotally regarding traffic right now, and the Amazon stretch is probably under a kilometer. It's probably 500 to 800 meters. And the amount of commute time it has lasted for me to go from Rushworth to Longos, which is 1.3 kilometers away, when they reduced it down to one lane, and they did that for about, I think, 10, 12 days, took me about 35 minutes to, I should have walked. I mean, to Jeff's point, yeah, I should have walked, but it was probably raining that day. I guess my point is, as this
umbrellas,
I apparently don't know what umbrellas is either, but as much as the actual impact on the existing residents right now cannot be understated of these expansion projects. Yeah, ideally we would always say it would hopefully not impact the residents as much as they think it will. But I'm seeing firsthand the inverse is true, right? So I've covered parking, traffic, I've covered transit and active transportation. My last one is ultimately safety. And I'm not looking at this. I know some residents have suggested, renters would lead to more crime. I don't grant that premise. I spoke to Inspector Martin, and he said DRPS has no statistics that can back that up. But we are talking about a 15-story high rise. And council just got a presentation from AJX Fire saying that they feel they're somewhat understaffed, right? Are we, by the time that 15-story tower is built, would we have the safety of Ajax Fire to put out a fire on the 14th floor?
Point of order. I've listened for we're an hour into what's going to be a very long meeting, and we are here to discuss the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. And for the last half hour, I've listened to questions about site plan, which we're not talking about site plan today. We're not talking about traffic. We're not talking about garbage. We're not talking about parking. We're talking about official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. We're not talking about height of the buildings. It's a concept. So I would just please.
But we are talking about height of the buildings.
I would like to ask Council Lee to please stick to the agenda. It's going to be a very long meeting, and we've just burned up a half hour asking questions that may or may not be relevant in a year when this official site plan comes ahead. So
I'm sorry, but traffic, they did a traffic study because it's absolutely related.
Crime is not part of what we're discussing here today.
What about height?
If I might just jump in, how much longer, Regional Councillor Lee?
No, my point ultimately is just what considerations have we done factoring safety, fire safety into the building of a 15-story? Because again, we're talking about height.
And those will be part of the site plan application process when it comes forward. That's my point of order. Thank you, Chair.
All right, that was my last question, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence.
Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry, I don't want to get frustrated with the process, but again, I'm just trying to keep things on track. Our Bruno or Mr. Scopacasa, just some questions to you. Just please confirm, just so everybody watching understands, we are simply here to discuss the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment today. And we're not even actually here to discuss our decision on that matter. The only thing that we are here to discuss is whether we are going to defend this or not at the Ontario Land Tribunal. Is that accurate?
That's correct, Mayor. The whole objective here is for the committee to provide us direction on how these applications should be dealt with at the future hearing with regards to the appeals of these applications.
I just, thank you. I just want to keep that right at front of mind, because we're going to have a lot of delegations. We're going to have a lot of people get into a lot of details, but I want to make it very clear to people, we're not at that stage yet. Those will have time to go through the full site plan process, and every single building of the 6 buildings, or sorry, yeah, of the 5 buildings, sorry. If we do decide to support staff's recommendations today, to not oppose at the board, which is all that we're deciding today, is whether to oppose at the board or not. Each one of those will have to go through their complete site plan, start to finish, which will determine everything from parking to fire to garbage to snow removal to landscaping to everything else. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you.
Site plan deals with the detailed design of each block, including the buildings and all the items that you listed.
And I'm absolutely happy to get into all those when we get to the site plan process. But right now, I feel they're a bit premature, and I want to get to the residents. I want to hear what the residents have to say, but I also want to sort of set the stage. The other thing I want to ask you, Mr. Scopacasa, is the current zoning that's been in place on these lands since our official plan was approved in year 2000, regardless of what was maybe shown in the sales pavilion. I don't know what was shown in the sales pavilion, but I've heard it was condo or townhomes. Has the height of the buildings that are before us today been allowed under that zoning since 2000?
Not
Or
exactly.
whenever the official plan was approved. It might have been slightly after.
Well, there's been some changes to height permissions when the town did a review of its official plan in order to update it and address the growth plan policies that were put in place by the province, and that permitted an additional height permissions from 6 to 8 stories
Right.
for medium density. That's where some additional height has changed, but the 15 stories and 8-story permissions are currently in the official plan. We're not dealing with a request to increase height permissions of buildings on these lands.
And thank you. And that's where I wanted to go with that question, because I also want the residents to understand, because I've received a lot of emails and I read them all. And I absolutely understand what the residents' concerns are, but I want them to fully understand that not one person on this council, no matter how hard they want to change it, can change the height of those buildings. Those are allowed under the current zoning. Is that correct?
They're permitted under the current official plan policies that are applicable.
Yeah.
Not the zoning, the official plan.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I meant. Thank you for clarifying. Because I think that's very important. Because again, I've read a lot of these emails and people, I mean, this is not about whether you vote for me again or any member of council again. Regardless, the official plan that was approved well before any of the residents in this neighborhood bought or moved into their homes, if they're buyers or resellers, well before any of those homes were ever there, that was in the plan. And that's an important piece to this. What we're here today to discuss is, again, at the board, because really the decision making for this has been taken out of our hand since it is now at the tribunal, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're not even deciding on this or not. A third party, unelected third party, is going to make the decision on this, not this council.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to speak a little bit to the concept. I understand this is just a concept, but when I first saw this, and I remember myself and the councillor of the day back in early 2010, just before the 2010 election, sitting down with representatives from Medallion and looking at this development. This is not new. And it's been quite a while coming. There's also been some pretty considerable changes. And some of those changes, I wonder if you could, I'll call them concessions, if you could highlight for us, please. And I'll pull up my notes here as well, but let's start with the park block.
Yeah, that's one of the, I would say the key concession that has been made is that the proposal has been revised to include the large park block right at Rosland and Hilton Gate.
And originally that was not part of the proposal. It was 6 buildings instead of 5.
Correct, yes. And that's another change, is the reduction in the amount of buildings from 6 to 5.
Right.
And the introduction or the shift of the commercial space within one of the buildings to create a mixed use building. So in essence, we're reducing the impact or of the development proposal by reducing the amount of buildings and then incorporating the commercial space within a building.
And there's also been some minor technical in nature amendments, like moving the commercial space. There has been a minor reduction in the number of units requested.
That's correct.
And the Section 37 community benefits.
That's correct. So that discussion is ongoing. We haven't ironed everything out yet, but that's part of the process. Under the Planning Act, we, the municipality, have the right to ask for community benefits based on the proposal to increase the density here. And that discussion is ongoing. So that originally was not part of the initial submission.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So really what we are here today to decide is the increased density. Without the increased density, really the proponent didn't need to come for any permissions. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're just talking.
The increased density is fundamental to the development applications before us. That's what it boils down to.
That's really what we're here about.
Correct.
And with increased density, according to our official plan policy 3.2.2.5C, according to the report, because they want increased density, the proponent will be required to pay Section 37 community benefit charges.
That's correct.
Which are fairly considerable and will be able to, well, I won't get into what we can use those for, but they are fairly considerable. And if the proponent doesn't agree to those Section 37, they don't get the increased density.
It will be decided by the Ontario Land Tribunal at the hearing.
Okay.
So, and anything we're able to secure between now and the hearing, if you know, we could secure it now and get it and make sure it's formalized in an agreement between the applicant and the municipality, or we risk dealing with it at a hearing, and the items that we would get as community benefits would be decided by the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Right. So, and is there a possibility that all the concessions that we've been able to get so far, like 6 buildings to 5, the 0.96 hectare park, the moving of the commercial to a better zone, all those things, they could go away?
Yes, they could all fall off the table because at the time they submitted their appeal, the appeal was based on their initial submission, not the submission that we're discussing today. And based on the old OMB rules, the hearings are what's called de novo. So we could be dealing with not only a proposal that deals with the initial submission, it could be something totally different that is then, you know, discussed, analyzed, and a decision is made by the board member at the hearing.
Right, thank you.
So we could end up with something that is not what we're dealing with today.
Okay, you answered my next question, because again, the decision-making power has been taken out of our hands since this was appealed to the board. And I believe this was appealed originally back in 2010 over OPA 41, which was again to deal with density. but it's just dragged on for quite some time. But the risk is, should council decide today to defend this, oppose this, I'll call it, we stand a chance, and the residents of Castlefield stand a chance of getting this anyway without any of those concessions, without any community benefits, without anything else.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you.
And on top of that, the town would spend a considerable amount of money, hiring a lawyer or solicitor to deal with these matters at a future hearing, which can be very costly.
Well, especially we have a staff report supported by Ajax staff, so we would have to hire, if we could even find other planners to represent our case against our own staff and pay lawyers to do it.
That's correct.
Okay. I have a couple of thoughts regarding some potential traffic calming. I know we're not there yet, but I know that's one of the strong concerns that we're going to hear about from some residents tonight. What would be your thoughts on pedestrian improvements or traffic calming? And maybe Mr. Grieve could answer this at Rushworth and Carberry Mansbridge intersection, and also Hilton Gate and Stiles Whitlock.
Sure, I would be happy to answer your question, Mr. Mayor. I think those are something that could be looked at site plan, at the site plan process. I think those intersections are obviously gateway intersections into the Castlefield neighborhood, and looking at elements such as like a raised intersection could be something that would help slow traffic traveling in and out of that neighborhood.
I would prefer them to be part of the community benefit. That's why I bring them up today. I would like them in the original agreement that we will hopefully be able to decide on before this goes to the session on October the 15th, the case management conference.
And so those could be elements that would be contained within such an agreement. We would obviously have to, through the discussions that are being had with Medallion, propose those initiatives and see if those are willing to be identified. But absolutely, staff can
I'll ask them
explore that.
What about a traffic signal at Rosland and Hilton Gate?
I think that's another potential option. Their initial traffic study shows that it's not a required signal in terms of the traffic manual test, but again, could be something that is considered.
So, and it could also form part of the community benefits, section 37?
Yes, to my understanding, it could.
Now, part of the recommendations in the report is that the proponent enter into an agreement for section 37, subject to town approval, I think is what the wording was. Who makes that decision? That doesn't come back to council, does it?
Well, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Just get clarification on your question, Mr. Mayor, through the chair.
Well, just reading the recommendation, let me pull it up. Page 5, 1 second. That this says that council directs staff to advise the Ontario Land Tribunal that subject to the applicant providing section 37 benefits to the satisfaction of the town of Ajax will not object. So who makes the decision on whether it's satisfactory to the town?
If I may, through the chair to the mayor, this will be part of the discussions through the future CMC and obviously the hearing before the tribunal. And then I guess it determines on where we end up if we're entering into minutes of settlement and the section 37 agreement. Those will be part of those discussions, and we'd have to bring that back to council because staff wouldn't have authorization to enter into those agreements without seeking council's authorization to enter into those minutes of settlement or Section 37 agreements, etc. We'd have to come to council with any of that information and report accordingly.
Could that be done before the October 15th case management conference?
Through the chair to the mayor, I guess it could if the discussions were advanced with Medallion and we nailed down those Section 37 aspects.
Okay, I'll save those questions for the proponent when we get to that stage. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you much, Council and staff for your indulgence.
Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Scopa-Casa, for your presentation, and to the residents of taking the time to come here tonight. A quick question just on maybe some clarification, if you can. It might be for Mr. Grieve, but I'll let you decide. On the slide, you had provincial policy statement from the province. I think you spoke about the relationship between the widening of Rosland Road, I'm trying to stay on topic here, and the number of units that can happen at the same time. I believe in the report, or somewhere in the report, the number is a maximum as we speak of 357 units with the way the road we all know is right now. And until the road is widened, and again, I'll ask Mr. Grieve to comment on this, that would be the maximum amount of units. And the widening of the road is supposed to be in 2028. Could you pull all that together and maybe comment on that section? Again, through the chair, maybe through Mr. Scopa-Casa to Mr. Grieve. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer that, Bruno. So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin, you're correct. As outlined in the report and as documented in the findings of the traffic study, 357 units or what is envisioned as Block A in the concept before us would be able to proceed under the current configuration of Rosland Road, and that future blocks would be able to proceed once the ultimate widening of Rosland to 4 lanes is completed. Currently, staff have identified in our long-range capital forecast the construction of this section of Rosland Road. This is the Salem to Lake Ridge Road section for 2026. So construction would commence in 2026 and likely take 2 construction seasons, so be completed in 2027. Future buildings could be in line to be completed and occupied in that 2027 timeframe.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I think the mayor spoke to, maybe at another meeting, I have more questions in regards to the actual buildings and a lot of other comments, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Grieve. And thank you, Madam Chair.
I don't have anyone else on my speakers list. Did anyone else? Oh, Councillor Khan. And I see you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Scopa-Casa, I see mentioned twice in number 1 and 2 that subject to the applicant providing Section 37 benefits to the satisfaction of the town. And I think the mayor asked something similar to that, but where exactly are we at the town when it comes to the satisfaction of the Section 37? Can you speak to that a bit for me, please?
We're still in discussions with Medallion. I don't think we're at the stage to reveal any details other than what's been provided in the report. We were hoping to iron out the details for this staff report, so we could, tie a nice bow around the box and deal with all the issues with this meeting, but unfortunately it didn't roll out that way. So that's why the recommendation is worded the way it is. As our Director of Planning has mentioned, we will need to bring those details once we've finalized them forward to council, and they would make the decision of whether those items are satisfactory or not.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight and being part of this meeting. Great report and presentation. Just to clarify, my question was, I think, exactly the same as Councillor Tyler Morin regarding the construction. So on page 159 of the report for question 15B, it says that the traffic impact study indicates that only 357 residential units can be constructed prior to the widening of Rosland Road. Once Rosland Road has been widened, the balance of the dwelling units can be constructed. So that sounds to me like no, after 357 units are built, nothing else can be built until the widening of the road is completed. And then on page 31 of the report, it talks again about that second paragraph. It talks about the units, and it says the restriction would only limit occupancy of units and would not preclude obtaining site plan approval and building permits and construction. So I'm sorry if you answered already when you responded to Rob. I don't think I understood. Does that mean building can take place, just no occupancy, or no building can take place?
So construction can take place. The key issue here is occupancy, because that's when through occupancy, the traffic that the development would generate would filter through the road network. If buildings are built and they remain empty, not occupied, it doesn't create any impact on the road network. So
Right.
It's 357 units can be constructed and occupied. Now, Medallion does have the choice to build additional buildings, but not have them occupied prior to the widening of Rosland Road.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed section 4 when we talked about some of the reports that were presented in the application, that they're, as far back as 2013, 2016. So will new reports, are they still valid, these reports? The findings?
Well, some of the items are reports that were prepared quite a while ago. All the reports would likely need to be updated when applications for site plan approval are submitted for each block within this development. I guess that's the item that residents need to understand is there's still an additional planning approvals that Medallion needs to obtain before construction can begin. So through the site plan application, we will ask for another slew of required reports, traffic, functional servicing, noise reports, all of that. And they will likely be updates to the reports that have already been submitted and bring those reports to the level of detail that's required when reviewing a site plan application.
Great, thank you very much. Those are my questions. Everything else has been addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other counselors with questions? Okay, so we are going to move now to the public portion of.
Chair, could
Yeah.
I move that we have a 5-minute break before we get into the public session?
That's fine with me. We have a motion to move for a 5-minute break. All in favor? Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, we are live again.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We've now reached the point of the meeting where we're going to have public comments. I'm going to be opening this up for the public. So for the attendees on the webinar, please use the raised hand feature to indicate you wish to speak. Delegations will be limited to 5 minutes in length for individuals and 10 minutes for groups. There will be no opportunity for repeat delegations. I'd like to also remind everyone that while we are welcome to all comments and points of view, speaking disrespectfully of others or using offensive language is not acceptable. And we may end your delegation early if speakers are not able to abide by these rules. I want to thank the public for your patience. Sometimes nature calls in ways that we just have to address right away. So we thank you for your patience. And Mr. Clerk, who is our first speaker?
Madam Chair, our first speaker for tonight is Vijay Shah, representing the Castlefields Residents Association Corporation.
Okay, welcome, Vijay.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. So yes, I represent the Castlefields Residential Association Corporation. And yeah, we respectfully petitioned the town of Ajax and other agencies to be, we're absolutely against this proposal. In a nutshell, the size of this proposal is just astronomical. I mean, it's really building a new city next to a village. It just doesn't fit in the lands proposed. And there's certainly history going back with this. I know Medallion had proposed way back to only build townhomes in this area. So something has changed dramatically. And I think, as Councillor Lee also mentioned, this is certainly a proposal that the size of which has never been seen before in Ajax, and I would dare say in anywhere within Ontario, to be honest. It is the first of its kind, and it reminds me of the time when I used to play SimCity, building a village, and growth is supposed to be balanced and it should evolve. This doesn't evolve. This is a revolution. It's as I mentioned, it's the building of a huge city, and there's so many aspects to this that the residents are quite rightly concerned about. I'm going to jump straight into it. I know you're only giving me 10 minutes. One of the comments made was, well, the height of the buildings is permitted, but having said that, the density definitely is not. So the density increase proposed is from 75 to 317 for medium density area, and then 185 to 650. That is not small. That is not trivial. That is absolutely astronomical. It's 4 times what the bylaw allows. So that in itself needs to be done extremely carefully, and there should be considerations given to a lot of other things, which quite frankly we have heard nothing about. We've heard today from the planning department that there will be further detailed studies coming down, but really, how can something be detailed out when right off the bat at this level it just seems virtually impossible to manage? It's going to be a waste of time and money with a lot of these things to proceed, given the scale of the project that's been proposed. Some of the main concerns that the residents have is, in order of priorities, is the road, the widening of the road that's proposed for Rosland, and the timelines that go along with it. I'm going to defer that to my colleague Naveen Ladha, who's going to talk about that later. but that is a major concern. The traffic congestion along that road is so high currently that even building 4 lanes is not going to resolve some of the issues. There's a huge mega center, Amazon distribution center, located there, and they probably are going to have plans to grow as well. The Amazon, the Amazon, they have a dedicated light just for the Amazon currently, and I think there are only 2 lights along that road. Traffic studies have not been completed, so that's another major concern. And some of the studies I think were done during COVID time, where it was lockdown. So, I mean, obviously there's not going to be any traffic during those periods. So a lot of those kinds of studies are they're all going to have to be redone. So specifically with regards to health and safety, I would like to talk about some of the concerns there. Yes, a fire. So the fire department. So there are 17 apartment buildings proposed, and according to the regulations, there must be 42 firefighters on site during a high-rise fire. The City of Ajax Fire Department only employs 84 firefighters right now. And this is a major issue for the community. I don't know if there's any plans to increase the number of firefighters in accordance with the size of the proposal. But again, if you're going to be building a city of this scale, you're going to have significant increase of firefighters. So that's going to be very costly as well. The developer, in attempts to appease the citizens, they've proposed the inclusion of parks, soccer fields, or cricket fields, or whatever. However, it's in the proximity of the arterial road, which is quite a busy road. So it's not really a safe place to locate those kinds of things. And then the 15-story tower, which is proposed, is right next to the stormwater management pond. And last year there was a big flood. So, I wonder if they've taken into consideration the safety aspects. Yeah, the plan is great. It looks great, but there are so many concerns with it for the residents that it just doesn't seem possible. Parking is severely restricted now, and with the amount of residents that are proposed to build here, there's going to be a significant shortage of parking. And a lot of people, I know they said it's going to be a pedestrian zone, transit. It's really not friendly for transit right now. Just one bus route is not going to be sufficient. You really need train stations. When you build something like this, you need multiple levels of transit that take place, not just one bus route. So yeah, those are some of the major issues that we have right now. There's lots more, but I know I'm limited by time. The transit supportive development that is in the PPS, I don't see that in the plan anywhere. I mean, yeah, they're saying we'll do it, but yeah, what's going to be done? We don't know, and I don't think it is possible, to be honest, to cater for that volume of residents. So in short, I think, to summarize, what we have here is an extremely large corporation. It's a powerful developer who is taking on an elected body of officials and the residents, and they're trying to force something onto them, which is really unpalatable. I mean, it makes a lot of money, yes, for sure, but it's a balancing act, and this is a totally unbalanced proposal. So yeah, those are my proposal submissions. Thank you.
I can't believe after 15 months, I still didn't unmute. Mayor Collier, thank you very much. Mayor Collier has a question.
Thank you. Before I start, Madam Chair, Mr. Shaw, you mentioned that Naveen Latta was going to do a further delegation. If you do a 10-minute delegation, our policy is that you're giving a presentation for a group, not that you each get 10 minutes because you're part of a group. Can you just clarify, is your intent to have 4 people speak for 10 minutes each?
No, Mr. Mayor. The proposal is that I just leave that specific aspect of the widening of the road to Naveen Latta, and he'll speak as an individual.
Okay,
I'm
that's
speaking
fine.
in terms of
Because generally, if you're representing a group, we give you extra time because we're not going to have a whole. But if you're,
I respect that. I understand. Yes, thank you.
I've taken some notes, and I thank you for representing the group and bringing your concerns here today. And I'm going to ask you a few questions and hopefully try and clarify a few things for myself and hopefully for the group as well. I want to, because twice tonight it's been said that this is not something we've done before as far as size. So I just want to ask, are you aware of the development that's been approved at Taunton and Rosland Road, a number of high density buildings that have been approved there? Because that development is actually 1,400 units per hectare.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been done. Actually, I would suggest Pat Bailey Square probably is up about the same amount as this too. And I guess I can't say this in a question, but the way things are going with higher density and mixed use in Ajax, those numbers, I know they're lower in the official plan because the official plan is a bit dated and is going to be updated over time. But that is part of the official plan amendments that we did, like 41, for instance, which speaks to increased density. And that is the way that things are starting. We recognize the fact that we have a lot of single family homes, but a lot of people in our community, young people, can't afford the $1 million homes that they have in Castlefield or more. And we need to have these alternate forms. I guess I'll ask, are you aware of that? That is sort of the way things are going as far as higher density.
Well, Mr. Mayor, no, thank you for the question. It is absolutely, yes. We are totally aware of the fact that there is a need for higher density, and the population is growing substantially. I think the correct terminology I would like to use is it has to be a respectful and balanced approach. I don't think there is any intention of the residents to say that, no, there should be no development, but it's the balance aspect of this. And I'm sure, there have been other developments which may have been of a higher density. I can't speak to that, unfortunately, because I don't know any details about those. But I can only speak to this particular presentation, and it just seems totally out of balance to me and the residents.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And again, this is sort of the new way of thinking and the new way that things are going, not just in Ajax, but across Durham and the GTA.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you mentioned was traffic, and in the presentation or the report that we have before us, there was a traffic study done. But one of the things that I had asked staff earlier, I just want to reiterate, did you hear me say, as each building is developed, they have to go through the site plan, and part of the site plan process is they will have to, in all likelihood, redo their traffic studies, redo their parking plans, look at the fire management at that point, and a lot of those studies will have to be redone and updated at that stage, because the development, the concept plan we see isn't necessarily what we're going to get. And so there are those safeguards in place. Were you aware that those traffic studies will be done again?
Yes, I did hear about those. And that is great and absolutely welcome as we go along. However, I mean, where we stand right now, knowing what's going on Rosland Road, adding all these units, additional units there, something drastic needs to happen. Like even widening it to 4 lanes is it seems unlikely that it'll handle the volume going. So it just seems that it's not possible, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a planner, so I can't really speak to that.
Exactly.
That's why we have to rely on the experts and what they say in the studies. So I don't know enough to question that either. I just wanted to point that out to you, that there are further safeguards. And one of the other things that Councillor Tyler Moore mentioned was the fact that given Rosland currently, the maximum that could be built at this time would be building A only, which is, I believe, 347 units. And once that building A was built, they wouldn't be able to occupy any of the others. They could build them, but they can't occupy any of the other buildings until Rosland Road has been widened and those traffic issues have been addressed. So were you aware of that?
Yes, I heard that. No, for sure. But again, I think just from where we are right now, it just seems highly unlikely that that problem is going to happen. And like I've managed large projects before, and like right off the bat, if we know that something is not likely, it's the probability of something happening is low, we usually don't proceed with that, like because it costs money to go down a road. So you also have to factor in the financial aspects and the budgeting aspects. You don't want to be wasting money knowing that this is highly unlikely and it's going to be very distasteful. It's going to be very unpopular with the residents. And I'm representing the residents. I mean, there's no secret about that. So, that will be our position, is that this doesn't make sense. Why are we spending so much time and effort when there is so much highly unlikely that this scale of a project can be accommodated by widening a road to 4 lanes, and also having a density of this magnitude.
I can't speak to that, as I said. That's not my expertise. But did you hear when I talked about earlier, when I asked questions to Mr. Scopacasa about council's limitations on this and what we can and cannot control in this development?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that's a pretty important, because what I'm trying to do, I understand this is not popular. I get that. I've heard that loud and clear. However, I've tried to really manage expectations and make sure the residents understand. I mean, threatening council with "we're not going to vote for you next time" isn't going to change what we can or cannot do, but we're trying to make the best. Something like Rosland Road is something we can control. The height of the buildings and the others are not, but things like Rosland Road and the site plan is something that we can control. The decision on the zoning and the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw at this point are not something that we get to make the decision on. So just to answer your question about the probability of Rosland is something that we can't control. And I know I will be following that very, very closely, as I have this whole process. I just want to talk quickly about density and a couple other things, and then I'll be done. I talked about the other development that had 1,400 units per hectare. And then this one, they're asking for, in building A, there's a chart on page 9 of the report, but they're asking for an increase from 185 to 650 units per next hectare. And I just want to point out and ask that are you aware that just because it says 650 per hectare, that doesn't mean there's 650 in that building. There's 347 in that building. But because of the height, that equates to about 25 units per floor. But having such a big number makes it seem like there's a lot more.
Right, right. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you know, it's like a condominium building, right? I mean, obviously, the density per square foot would increase, but either way you look at it, Mr. Mayor, the residents concerned about, you know, the amount of people accumulated in such a small piece of land. I mean, it is big land. I know that, but you know, you're building, so there's going to be 5 buildings now, or was it 6? They reduced.
There was going to be 6. There is 5 in the works now. Right. Should this go to the tribunal, we don't know what it will end up as.
Right, exactly. So the plan now is for 5 and then 1 high-rise building. So,
4 plus the high-rise.
4 plus the high-rise. Sorry, yes, thank you. It's hardly a major change from the residents' perspective. Yes, it's tiny. You know, it's a concession that you expect during a negotiation phase, but you know, I mean, it doesn't really make that much of a difference for the residents. It is still a big project.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I just want to talk quickly about, I'm not going to get into stormwater or parking because those will be addressed in site plan. Just the number of firefighters, because this has come up a few times, and I just want to clarify, we have just undergone our fire master plan, and every member of council is very much aware that moving forward with the higher density, we are going to need to hire more firefighters. So I just want to point out from that comment that we are looking at the first phase and potentially 20 more firefighters over the next year or two to start. And just point out that this building is still several years away, even if this was approved now. And that will give us time to catch up on our firefighter component. That's not really a question. I just wanted to make that we're aware and we're working on that. I just want to talk to transit quickly, as I don't know if you know, my other hat that I wear is the chair of Durham Regional Transit. So I'm quite a big supporter of transit, and I can assure you that is a major transit route. And part of the decision of having high density and mixed use along these corridors, the reason why we allow the higher density is because, again, with higher density, I'm expecting a lot of these to be one bedroom units. And generally these, you know, 1 bedroom unit isn't going to have 2 or 3 cars in a lot of cases, but if people are buying or renting these units, we're kind of counting on them using transit. And I'm kind of counting on the proximity of these buildings near our business park with Amazon and everything else. I'm hoping that a pretty good chunk of the people that are there are going to be able to walk to work. And that's my logic. I know you're probably not looking at it that way, but I can assure you, and it's again, not really a question, but transit is first and foremost on my mind when it comes to things. And as far as access to the GO, access to our downtown core, and access to employment, there will be transit along those major corridors to meet those needs. And when we get to site plan, we'll be looking at things like bus stops and where they're located and everything else along those ways.
Yeah.
So that's not a question, that's just a statement, but I do appreciate you coming today, Mr. Shaw. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that has a question? Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the proponent, thank you for your presentation. How many residents do you represent in this group?
Well, there's definitely more than 1,000, 1,400. And maybe even more. It's a number that's constantly evolving. So it is a very large portion. And I'm sure there are a lot more who are concerned, but they just haven't, joined, or whatever reason. They're probably busy people, but 1,400 that I know of.
And it's my understanding you registered as a delegate for the CMC for the OLT, correct?
That is correct. Yes, we're seeking party status, so we would like to make our own submissions with the LPAT.
And regardless of what council decides today, you will still be going forward with your opposition. You'll still be going towards the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, regardless of what this council decides, correct?
Well, we would like, we would like to persuade as many people as we can. I don't view this as a battle or anything. I think it's a game of persuasion and common sense, and trying to speak logically about what a good plan would look like. So I don't look upon it as whatever the council decides. I think what we want to do is we want to have a loud voice of the residents who have been here for quite a while, and we want to be heard, and we want our input taken seriously into any decisions that are made, and that goes for the council as well as for the LPAT, because we're all parts of the council too, right? So we want just to be heard, I guess, and our concerns taken into account.
And just last question, thank you for that. If it's up to the entire community group, your wish would be to not grant the densities being requested, or in a sense to kind of, would it be to keep the densities as they are, or find a middle ground between the highest and the number they're currently at?
Well, yeah, definitely we would not be proposing the densities that are being put down currently. I think where the residents prefer, and the reasons why they purchased their properties in the first place, is the densities that were originally proposed by Medallion themselves seemed reasonable and realistic, and I think it was a good evolution that was planned back then. So I think the residents would be happy with something like that, but this is 4 times what they proposed originally, which is way out of whack.
Okay, thank you very much for your responses. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions to this resident? If not, thank you so much for taking the time to come out this evening, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, who is our next person?
Next, we have Navin Lada.
Hello, Navin. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Naveen Lara. I live in the Castlefield subdivision. I have been living here for last 12 years, and I have seen how this neighborhood has changed. So what I have heard for the last 2 hours from the planner and from all the planning department staff and the mayor is basically convincing us that if a powerful builder comes along and puts a proposal that is against the bylaws and against whatever we have been set in place, we are just going to move the goalpost and we are not going to challenge it. So I am not a civil engineer either, but I am an engineer. So to give you an example, if you tell an engineer, build me a toilet and a kitchen, they will happily do it. They'll build the plumbing, but is that right? That is the question here. So it is not just a matter of height, and the height that we were talking that the current zoning allows, even though the height is 6-story, I heard that no, they can build whatever 8-story that they are asking. That is not right. And the issue here is the density. The density is massive. We have heard this again and again that, that this will not get built today. You will just allow the first 300 and then site-specific plans. But what you have in front is that we allow this bylaw amendment to take place. We allow this official amendment to take place, and we not go against the town's planning department's recommendation to allow these and oppose this at the LPAT, just because we'll have to hire lawyers and go against our own planning department. So what this tells me is that for the last year, that all the feedback that you heard from residents, you're just saying, sure, we hear you, but unfortunately, if you don't agree to what Medallion is saying, you will not even get the Section 37 benefits and whatever, all these other things that I've heard for the last 2 hours. So what example are we setting here for the citizens of this town, that there are rules in place, but if a powerful builder comes along, they're allowed to change that by dangling all these benefits. You know, and I know what they have asked to begin with was very high. Just by removing one building and putting it apart, it doesn't work. And to give you an example of your so-called transit friendly, today there is a bus stop on the south side of Rosland across from Hilton Gate. You just need to stand here for a day and see how residents dart across that in the heavy traffic, because nobody wants to walk down to the signal that is at Audley or built at Rushford. So you'll see more such examples. And in terms of what will get built, if you're telling me that, okay, this entire thing is hinging on Rosland Road expansion, that road, just to let everybody know, is in the talks. There is discussion that this road ownership will be transferred over to region. And all this expansion that we are talking, it's not even been budgeted. The design will come in 2022. The part of Rosland between Salem and Rushworth, after Amazon proposal was approved, council did not even have budget to make that 4-lane today when we went through all this construction for last 2-3 months. It is still a 2-lane highway and a 2-lane roadway. And in that same amount, you have added what in my opinion looks like a divider which serves no purpose. You added a long left turn lane for purpose of Amazon. So we have got nothing. I have lived here since 2009. And since this subdivision built out started in 2002, what has changed in Rosland? There was a farmland south of Castle Fields where now we have the huge sundial community. They added 2 exits onto Rosland. One of them is Signal. Amazon came and they added lights. All throughout this time, nothing changed in Rosland. So if you're trying to convince us that Rosland Road widening will be enough, that is enough just for what we have today, not for this 1,304 units that you're talking. And I respectfully request the council today to just don't go by what the staff is saying. We are the people who live here and we experience this every day. So whatever the staff report, unfortunately, it looks like an essay to me that says we have gone through the PPS, we have gone through the town official plan, the Durham region growth plan. All of them, they just ask for a density of 50. Already the approvals they have is for 75 hectares. And what they are asking is massive. There is just not enough infrastructure to even put, if you ask me, the 300 units that you're talking about after all the development that has gone through in this road. So I request you to not back down just because they have gone to LPAC and allowed this, because they came with that application in January 2017. And right away in November 2017, they went and filed an appeal with OMB. Residents were never even told about this development until May 2019. So you can see where Medallion's intentions were from all this chronology.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
I think I've said enough. You have heard Vijay speak, and you have heard the councillors speak. So there's nothing more to add to that. I just want you to consider all those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Latta, for your presentation. I just want to ask a couple of questions, make a couple of clarifications. One of the statements you made that we were approached by a large builder, and you kind of implied we're being pushed around. I just want to clarify that, and I can't speak for council, I'll speak for myself. I deal with every development exactly the same. It doesn't matter the size of the builder, it doesn't matter what the proposal. We are bound by the Planning Act, the Provincial Policy Statement, the Places to Grow Act, the Durham Region Official Plan, the Town of Ajax Official Plan. And I guess my question is, are you aware that we have to follow those rules? Because from what you said, it doesn't sound like you were aware of that. Because we are not giving any preferential treatment to this developer, nor do we give preferential treatment to any developer. They all get treated the same because we have to follow the same rules.
Yes, I'm very well aware. I have spent my last 1 year researching this project. And who is advising you that this proposal meet all those plans that you're mentioning? It's the staff, the town of Ajax. I have read those documents as well, and I have read the staff report. So how do you know that this proposal is meeting all those requirements? This does not fit the community at all. There is no infrastructure. Those are the things that those plans speak to, and it's right there in the staff report. I have seen affordable housing mentioned several times in the staff report. This proposal is not building any affordable town housing. It is building market rate rental housing.
Well, those are some of the items identified in the Places to Grow provincial policy statement, but it doesn't mean that every application has to have those things. That's a guideline. So just to answer your question, that's a guideline. Not everyone is going to check all those boxes, but those are sort of things that we work towards. But so anyway, I just wanted to clarify that because it sounded like you thought we were giving preferential treatment to this event, and we are not. I don't give preferential treatment to anybody. This is the same rules for everybody. And that's why I've tried to be very upfront and manage expectations of the Castlefield development, because I understand I've been doing this a long time. And I've seen how residents get when there's an infill development beside their homes, and it's personal. And people take it very, very seriously. But I always have to make sure they understand the limitations. And in this case, you spoke to this. Since this is already at the tribunal, this is a different set of rules for us. And we actually have even less say at this point. You're aware of that the tribunal will be making this decision, not this council?
Tribunal does not work in isolation. They have to follow those same plans. They have to listen to residents. Right. You're just making it sound like just because they went there. Who went there? Medallion went there. Within 10 months of submitting the application, they did not even wait. So that tells you what Medallion intentions are. Just because they went to LPAT doesn't make this decision just behind some closed curtain. Well, they have to follow all these rules.
I'm not making excuses for the developer. I believe, and perhaps Mr. Scopacasa can correct me, but the application to the Ontario Municipal Board happened, I think 2012 or something. Like this, is that fair, Mr. Scopacasa? When was the application made to the board?
The appeals of these applications we're dealing with tonight was in 2017.
But was this
pardon me?
Was this a further action from the original since they are already at the board over OPA 41?
There's two separate appeals here. OPA 41 dealt with the growth plan and revising our official plan to meet those provincial policies under the growth plan. So they appealed some of the, I guess, changes that were made through that official plan amendment. And then they appealed these applications we're dealing with tonight in 2017.
Okay. So if this goes, if council decides that we're not going to support this tonight, Mr. Lapa, and this goes to the board, and the board sides on the side of Medallion, I guess you realize that you are going to get whatever the board says they get. Not what we see in front of us today specifically, but whatever the board decides, not your elected Ajax council decides, which we can control through site plan, but you're going to get what the board decides. I guess my question is, are you okay with that?
Yes, the residents are okay. We are well aware. I was at the CMC, and these tribunals, they do not decide things in isolation. I have been to tribunals of other government agencies.
So what you're saying is, and you are a representative of this committee, right? Or
I am not here, but I'm speaking right now as an individual.
Okay, well, that's important, because if you're speaking on behalf of the community and the 1,400 residents, and this council takes you at your word, and we decide not to support this, and it goes to the board, and the board turns around and gives something that nobody wants. I mean, at least we've got some concessions that I think will benefit the community, given our limitations here. I don't see that as a good situation. You're saying you would prefer that decision?
I just find, Mayor, that you're just trying to convince us into a certain path. I don't get it. We have heard what you have said before. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, you're just you're guiding us towards one particular path. I sense that from the beginning. I'm sensing that. It is not that the tribunal decides things without listening to our concerns. They don't. That's why we are also seeking party status, and we can also seek the other status where we can speak. Tribunals don't work in isolation.
Okay, so that's fair, and I'm glad that if you're part of the group that has sought party status, that's good, because that's your right as well. Just like it's the developer's right to appeal to the board if we take too long to make a decision, which is what happened, or that you are absolutely welcome to appeal this council's decision as well, which it sounds like you're doing, which is good. But if this goes to the board, if we decide one way, say this council decides, and I'm not making excuses. I don't know everything. I'm not a planner, but I do ask a lot of questions. And by the time we get to meetings like this, I probably discussed this at least a dozen times with staff. So I kind of know a little bit about it, but I always take the direction from the professionals, because I'm not a professional. So if the professionals are telling me this, I have to take that as fact until somebody tells me differently. And I have to base my decisions on that. That's called my fiduciary duty. The other thing that we have done, and I guess you're not aware, so are you aware? I'm going to tell you, we have had an independent review by a lawyer, and we've been given legal advice. Because that's, again, part of my fiduciary duty to make a decision is I have to make sure I'm asking questions to have reasonable assurance that I'm making the right decisions, because I'm not a professional planner or a lawyer or a traffic engineer or an engineer like yourself. So when my planning staff is telling me one thing, and when the developer has put forward all the proper traffic reports and everything else, and when the lawyer is telling us, and not just me, he's told several members of this council, I don't remember everybody that was at the meeting, that this is an unwinnable case at the board. And it's going to cost Ajax residents hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to defend an unwinnable case. I make my decision based on that information. And I want to make sure I'm telling residents up front, this is why I'm making this decision, because this is the advice we got. How would you deal with that? If all the experts were telling you one thing, but then a resident, and no disrespect intended at all to anybody, but you're an engineer, but you're not a planner, and you're not. So how would you deal with that if you had a staff member who was a professional in the field telling you one thing, but you were saying another?
Point of order, Chair. I don't think that line of questioning is appropriate to someone just speaking at an open house in terms of their opinion. They're not asked to make these decisions as elected. They're not elected representatives, and so I don't think it's appropriate.
Fine. I won't put them on the spot, but I just want to make that statement that that's the situation I'm in and this council's in. We've got professional advice. And I respect residents and we're here to represent residents. But again, I represent 132,000 residents, not just the 1,400 in Castlefield. And I, in good conscience, cannot enter into an unwinnable appeal and cost the residents, the taxpayers, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. To me, I would rather try and get the best deal we can get. And to me, that deal is one less building, big money. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million in Section 37 community benefits, and the park and everything else. But anyway, that's just me. Let me ask you one final question, because you spoke about accessing, you spoke about transit at Hilton Gate. And I asked Mr. Scopacasa about what he thought about a traffic signal at Hilton Gate and Rosland being part of our Section 37 request. Do you think that would help with the transit that you spoke of, people crossing to get to the transit stop?
I fell off my chair when I heard you say that we will put another light, instead of thinking and going back that we are talking about all this simply because of the density change. Do you realize where is the density of 75 hectare units to 600? You're already assuming, and you're already in your mind approving of the density and coming up with solutions for that. Putting more traffic lights is not going to. I live here. I every day go at that intersection at that stoplight. I wait for at least 5 minutes for some nice cars going westbound to stop so that I can get into that lane. All along, seeing the circus of pedestrians jumping across the street there.
Well, my question is, do you feel that that would help? You brought up transit as part of your delegation, and you said about the stop, and it was hazardous. So I'm asking you a question because we are discussing, and I had already brought this up earlier, do you think that would help? I know we're talking about density, but you brought up transit.
What would help is we do not even reach that point where we add that much density and add to the problems.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you very much for your delegation.
Regional Councillor Lee. You are on mute.
15 months, right, Madam Chair? This question is actually to Mr. Scopacasa in relation to just one of the responses the mayor had given. I was under the impression that the LPAT will decide on these amendments, these density and height. Is it true they will also decide on site plan?
No.
I thought that's what, okay.
No, that's incorrect.
Okay. I want to make sure that distinction is there of just the LPAT or the OLT decision is strictly on the issues that we are discussing right now in terms of density and height specifically, right?
Right. The proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment only.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question. Thank you, Chair.
And if, just point of order, if I gave that impression, that was not my intention. I'm aware that it still has to go through site plan.
Actually, just a very quick follow-up then. Let's say, I know this is a hypothetical, but it is somewhat related. Let's say it gets to site plan. So let's say LPAT sides with the developer and they submit a site plan that the town of Ajax disagrees with. Can they then go to the OLT again regarding site plan?
They could, yes.
Okay, that's a pretty important distinction to make of a lot of the mayor, repeatedly said that where the council can implement some safeguards through the site plan, but if the developer also appeals the site plan, then we're back to where we are at this moment at each phase hypothetically. So I just want to make that clear. So thank you very much, Mr. Scopacasa. Thank you, Chair.
So I just wanted to add the endorsement of the current plan would kind of set the framework for the site plans moving forward. So any huge deviation from it would likely, even if appealed, if the site plan was appealed, it would likely, not go over very well with the board member, considering that so much time and effort and analysis has been done on these current applications. And then the site plan, was, very skewed from what we're seeing here today.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions for this speaker? If not, thank you so much for coming out tonight. And Mr. Clerk, can we have our next speaker?
Yes, our next speaker is Thiru Paran.
Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me. So I have a few concerns and suggestions. One of thing is like during the discussion, they said we can use a bicycle for the transportation. Just wondering how we going to do, how we going to bike during the winter. So that's one concern. The second one, the applicant Medallion proposed a plan in 2008, and even the people who bought the house in 2010 were told it's going to be townhouses and semis. The Medallion clearly intentionally misled the community, and I hope they will do the same in future. Just consider that as a major thing. So that we have so many residents right now, they can witness it if you want. So, and I want to ask this question to Bruno. Do we have any park close to a regional road in Durham region? Just because I feel like putting a regional park next to a regional road is going to bring a heavy community safety. It's going to risk, and the kids going to jump in.
Could I just jump in here for 1 second? Could you use your whole 5 minutes, and then I'll write down your questions, and then we'll get the planner to actually answer everything at the end. That way we can keep track of the time a little bit better. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so that's the other questions regarding the park next to the regional road. And the next one, because right now due to the Amazon, we already suffered like 3 to 4 months of traffic. But right now, if we are going to continue this building and the road expansion, it's going to take another 5 to 10 years. That means almost a decade of dust, congestion. We had to suffer all this for a decade. So that's going to change the lifestyle of the community. Just consider that one. So having these huge buildings, it's going to take a lot of time. So it's 10 years of time is a lot. And also the developer is having all units rented. Why is that? You are putting a rental community in between and putting everyone in one place. It's going to bring community safety, and also it's going to impact the community. At least you have to have one building rental and rest with condos. That is different. But putting 1,400 unit rental unit, it's not reasonable, and it's not reasonable for community. And it's not, I don't know what kind of developer. So if you have an intention of having a concern with the community, they never do such a thing. So I would like these to be answered for me. Thank you.
Okay. Bruno, I think the one question that I did hear specifically for you was a park by a regional road.
Yes. So there are a number of examples in the town. It's not uncommon. There's a park at Rosland and Ravenscroft with a soccer pitch right up against Rosland. Rosland, as we all know, with discussions tonight, is an arterial road. We have playing fields associated with the McLean Community Center that are up against Westney Road, another arterial road. And the ACC, we have 2 soccer pitches right up against Harwood, which is an arterial road. So it's not uncommon. The park itself is not going to be right up against the curb of the road. There is still a boulevard, and it's an appropriate location for a park. It's fully exposed, people will see it, and hopefully it'll attract not only the residents here in the future development, but those in Castlefield, Sundial, and other areas to come and use the park.
Okay, and I think and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but you had a concern about safety and community and also dust during construction.
Yes, that's correct. And it's for a decade.
Okay. Director Romanowski, would you like to take that one?
I guess construction dust will all be subject to our municipal bylaws, hours of working and through our noise bylaw. Also, in addition to that, there's a site plan agreements that will be entered into. So any requirements for cleaning the streets or surrounding areas, storage of equipment, any other mitigation measures through the construction, which are all standard within our development agreements, would have to be abided by. If they weren't, then they would be subject to the municipality informing them of what needs to be rectified in order to clear up those issues.
But
your question?
No, still you want us to suffer like 10 years with the traffic and all this construction mess?
Well, I guess, I mean, part of the development is there will be some disturbances with regards to dust and whatnot. Similar to when the subdivision was built that you live in right now, there was disturbances and dust and whatnot. Might not have been that many people around. Similar to any development in, especially in an infill situation, there will be issues that arise, but there are measures in place through municipal bylaws that control those types of, I guess, nuisances that occur during development. It will be a significant period of time that development will occur. And as many measures and protections will be put in place through the appropriate agreements to mitigate those measures. We're not going to protect for everything, and we fully expect that we'll get complaints through the construction of not only this development, but any development within the town, and that's pretty standard comments that we get from residents. And the amount of time that it will take, it will take that amount of time to do that development, or it could take longer, or it could take shorter, depending on their building program and I guess market demands for this type of development and units that are going to be offered for rental in this case, as Medallion's principally a rental type of developer.
Thank you, Director. I'm wondering if there's any questions to this speaker. Not seeing any.
I didn't get it. Like, why are they allowing and why they approving the rental units, all of them?
If I may, through the chair to the resident. We can't dictate the tenancy of the buildings. Medallion does rental development, and that's the proposal that they've put forward. We can't dictate market condos or rental units or what have you. That's determined by the developer of the lands. We also need to look at providing for a range of different types of housing within our community. So singles, semis, towns, apartment buildings, stacked units, and rental condo are all part of that equation. So it's a need within the community. It's a need within Durham region. And we can't say that they can't have rental, and we can't say that they can't have condo. This is the model that they've put forward, and that's how Medallion is moving forward with that. Might be more appropriate to maybe through the chair have that question asked as Medallion to explain their model and why they do rental as opposed to market rate condos.
Anything further, sir?
Just to tell about this Medallion, the misled the community, will they do the same in future? So how you guys control that, right? So they didn't just misled one, they have misled so many communities.
So the proponent will have a chance and opportunity to speak after we've gone through our speakers list. And hopefully they've been taking some notes on how they would answer some of these questions.
So thank you, everyone. So I want every council to consider this 10 years of 15 years of dust. And if you think about you are living in this community, how you just so vote according to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming out this evening. Mr. Clerk, who is our next speaker?
Our next speaker is Kareem Volani.
Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just have a very simple question for Bruno, Mr. Romanowski, and somebody else who's written up as staff there. All I hear from you from the very beginning, all of you guys, everything is dandy, everything is pro-Medallion. What do you guys see as cons in this development? I want to hear from the mayor and all three of you, because everything I've heard so far, every time I've joined any meetings, is everything is honky-dory for Medallion. We live in this, I've been here since 10 years, 11 years, and it is still taking me an hour to get anywhere I want to get out from this for now. You guys have not done any kind of research on what kind of traffic is going on right now. You build an Amazon building right here in front of us. Nobody was consulted. One of your colleagues is suggesting, oh, we should use bikes now. Is he going to go out in -37 and take his bike? I don't think so. I'm not mad at anyone. Don't take this personally. But the Councillor Lee, who lives in this area here, I think he was very, very kind and generous to tell you exactly how it feels when we are here. We have spent a lot of money to get our houses here and to live here comfortably. Yes, something reasonable is fine, but just getting threatened by Medallion that, you know, this is it, and the mayor is continuously telling us, oh, we don't have a choice, we don't have a choice. You guys are taking property taxes from us. You are taking everything possible out of our hands from the residents of Ajax. I don't see too many jobs in Ajax. Also, somebody was proposing, mayor was saying maybe we can get jobs at Amazon. Anybody wants to work for minimum wage, I'll go to Amazon tomorrow if I don't have a job. Let's make some sense for this community. Okay, there are more than 1,500 people here asking all of you. So I want Bruno, Mr. Romanowski, to at least give us some idea. What are the cons? Pros, you guys are all for the system they've proposed. What do you think is wrong with it? Can somebody tell us? Please, if you don't mind. That's all my question is. I've heard about parking. I heard about all other stuff. I want that clarification. It would be really appreciated. And please, I don't want you to be political about it. Just be very straightforward. If you lived in this community, would you go through this hell for 10 years, as my previous neighbor was talking about? Kindly advise, please. Thank you kindly.
If I may, through the chair, just to get clarification on the question, is your question about whether or not the planning department supports the development, or whether or not us as individuals would live in your neighborhood during the development? So I just want to be clear with the question that I'm answering.
Both. They apply to both individually and as a department. As a department, I feel you are 200% talking positively about this thing. I haven't heard a single person saying that, okay, this is okay, but this might not, doesn't sound. Is your job to be political like this and just come out and agree with? Because what I saw, the mayor was reading something and you would agree to it. It was like you already sat down for 3 days. I will ask this mayor, and the person say, yeah, I agree with this. I will ask this and I agree with this. Why is this going on, man? We are in the 21st century. Sure. Let's be honest, sir.
Sure, 100% honesty. As a professional planner, I fully support the development proposal that's been put forward. It's appropriate development for where it's going to be located along an arterial road that will be widened to accommodate those capacities. There'll be improvements within the area. It's at the densities or the heights or the form of development that is supported by provincial policy, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and is the predominant type of development that's occurring within most GTHA municipalities, all the way from Niagara Falls to out this way in Durham region, up to Peterborough, Ottawa, etc. This is development that's occurring everywhere within our municipalities. Ajax, I guess, in a sense, bit of a, we're only 11 kilometers by 7 kilometers. We went through our greenfield development wave in the late 90s, early 2000s. Your subdivision being one of those subdivisions that were part of that massive expansion of residential development that took up a lot of greenfield development for a significant amount of time. And now we're left with the pockets that are left over that will accommodate medium and high density. And here we are discussing those today. So from a professional planning perspective, fully support as the director of this department, the recommendations that have been brought forward and the information that's in the report. As a resident, to live in the neighborhood, I live in Ajax. I don't live in this neighborhood, but I do live in a neighborhood where there is development going. And yeah, it's not the best. And yes, there's dust and there's dirt and there's stuff that's around. And Bylaw does their best to follow up with the applicants or the contractors and developers to help mitigate those things as best as possible. So, yes, it'll be difficult. Yes, there'll be dust. Yes, there'll be dirt. Yes, there'll be days where it rains and a dump truck takes mud out onto the street and spreads it around. But there's measures in place that I hope will be implemented and will be required to be implemented as the development occurs over time through the site. Access, if access is an issue, we can ensure access is from Rosland Road. There's a number of things that we can deal with through the site plan agreement that help control where vehicles go so they're not infiltrating within the neighborhood. And if we're being totally honest, and I'm trying to be as honest as I can while being professional at the same time, development creates dirt and dust and noise. And that's just the result of the development. That when they developed the houses you guys live in within the Castle Fields or Mulberry Meadows or our Imagination to the north, any of those developments, there is dust and noise and dirt and it impacted people as well. Maybe not as much, obviously, because the population has grown since then. But it's part of the environment we live in. Development occurs and dirt's moved around and dust does fly.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. It's not only dirt and all these things and mud and everything. This is just a small part of it. I'm sorry to tell you, sir, you might be a professional, and with due respect to your professionalism, I would strictly look at it in another angle as a human being. How this you are talking about as a professional. You are talking about having this area with the rental property. You're going to put so many residents up here. Right now, when I come out on the weekend, out of my own house, just up to Rosland, which is probably a kilometer or so. There are cars parked on the road that I have trouble. There are cars parked. There are so many cars parked there on the road right now. So I don't think that you might be a professional, but I don't think you're looking at it in other angles. I think you just have your quota to finish. That's my opinion. I'm sorry, I'm not hitting you personally. But
that's fine, and I would just reply to that as a professional planner. We're not obligated. We can't be narrow focused. We have to look at all aspects. We're professional planners, but we have to have consideration for engineering, transportation, community safety, public interest, and what is important for consideration through these applications.
So obviously you have not looked at safety as a one of the things that you're considering, because all of the speakers below have mentioned, you have not thought about all the parking headaches that we will all get, all about the time that is going to get wasted by we are not being able to get to our work because of all the mess that will be created. I think I will just leave it here because I want Bruno to spend 2 minutes to give me his cake now for 2 minutes of his thoughts, because I know he's going to come around the same kind of feeling that I'm getting from Mr. Romanowski. Please, if you don't mind.
I know the mayor would like to also respond. If you're okay with that, could we go to the mayor at this point?
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to tell me the same thing. He has no control, that he has told me before, and he's telling us the straight thing. We don't have control. We have to go through this, and just if we don't decide today, we are cooked. This is the message I'm getting all the time.
Okay, we're just gonna let the mayor speak at this point.
I mean, you've asked a question. We're trying politely to answer it. I'd appreciate it if you would let us answer the question. And
I'm sorry if I offended you, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, you haven't offended me. I'm just, when I asked a question, a point of order was called on me, said it was inappropriate. I feel this is probably along the same lines, but I'll gladly answer your question.
Thank you.
Because I mean that I have no problem with that. I don't live far from this development, and I have another development right by my house on Grayson, which is an infill development.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of dust, which there is. I mean, I've owned 3 new homes and gone through the development process 3 times. And that's my choice. And I'm sure you did if you were the original purchaser there at Castlefield. It's, as Director Romanowski said, that's just part of development. But how do I feel, like what your question was, what would I look at as, I think, a downside to this? And I've tried to be very clear with residents, because this, I have no bias to Medallion or any other development. When an application comes, I have to filter out all the personal parts. Okay, like people feeling that we don't want rental, for instance. Well, we don't get to choose whether it's rental or whether it's condo, just like if your neighbor decided they wanted to rent out their house, you don't get to choose that. That could be an Airbnb, and there's nothing we can do about that. Okay, when a developer comes, we have to weigh it on its merits. And when we have delegations from residents, although very personal, and I empathize with that, but I have to filter out the personal parts, and I have to always be aware of the rules. And the proposal in front of us isn't breaking the rules, except they followed the correct process and put an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment to amend the zoning. Do I think the zoning is a little high? I think it's a little high. And I've had this discussion with the developer. But I've also had legal advice from our solicitor that's told me, regardless of what I feel, what can we prove and what can we win? And that's different than what I feel. So that's the way I look at these things. When you ask about how I feel about it personally, I've lived in Ajax since I was 1 year old. I grew up here. I remember when the population was 12,000. And I know that we have to have development. As I said earlier, we need these higher density type developments. That's just the way it's going, as the director said, all across the GTA and all across the province. That's the way it's going, because in Ajax, we have a fixed urban boundary. We don't have any more greenfield land. All we have is these infill developments. So anything from here on forward, we're going to get these pushbacks from the residents because people don't want it built next to their house. I get that. I absolutely do. But the fact of the matter is, and whether you believe it or not, it's beyond our control. And I want to make sure that regardless of what people think of me, I want to make sure they understand the rules that we have to follow. And that's what I've tried to reiterate here a few times tonight. So I see this as growth. I don't see growth as a bad thing. I really want to address the fact that 70% of our residents have to travel outside of Ajax every day to get to work. We want to create these pedestrian friendly live work type things. Will you work at Amazon or any of those other places? Maybe, maybe not, but a lot of people will, and a lot of people need those jobs. We have bylaws in place to address dust and noise. And if there is an issue, we have ways to remedy that, and let your counselor know, let me know. And if there is dust or noise from this, we will definitely get on that and make sure that's taken care of. We take securities from the developer, and if they don't do it, we have their money that we'll use to pay to get it done and get it cleaned up. So we do have safeguards in place. You did bring up safety. We do have safeguards in place, but we're not there yet with this application today. This application today is strictly dealing with the zoning amendment and the density. And I've heard people talk about the density, but I haven't heard anybody who, and like I said to the last gentleman, I have to, since I'm not a professional planner or a lawyer or an engineer, I'm an accountant. Okay, I'm good with numbers, but I can't do a traffic analysis. So I have to rely on the professionals, and I have to rely on our staff to give me their professional opinion. And I don't have to like it, but that's what I have to use because that's what's given to me. If I had delegations who were professional planners or traffic engineers telling me something different, and proof outside, like we've got traffic studies, I have to look at the consultants who are also planners and engineers and go by that information, not by what people may feel is going to happen. So I don't know if that's really answered your question, but that's my personal feelings on it is I have to weigh the information. I have to do it in an unbiased manner. And I don't make decisions until I have all the information, and I ask a lot of questions. And I know residents won't always like what I have to say, but I can tell them I always do what I feel is the right thing. And right now, the way this application has been put forward, it follows the rules. And I have to follow the rules also.
All right.
I'm just gonna, out of respect for a rather lengthy speakers list, would it be all right if we just moved on at this point?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Romano. I would have still liked to hear Bruno because he's a couple of minutes from him to see, because I didn't hear anything against his proposal. Again, just like the mayor and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Romanowski, maybe Bruno can just end this, if you don't mind, for 2 minutes. Your feelings about if you lived here, please.
I wrote the report that we're talking about today, so I think my analysis is there. I'm not going to repeat what is in the report or in my presentation that was delivered tonight. I think the biggest issue here is losing some of the concessions or key components that were changed from the initial proposal. It's already been said. I think that's the biggest risk here, and the possible con that you're talking about when it comes to pros and cons. You could not have, you may not have a park here. And for anyone in the community to tell me that a park is not something that would be desired, I'm shocked by that. It's definitely an asset. When your kids want to go out and play, especially during COVID time, where outdoor space is extremely valued, I find that shocking. And the reduction of buildings, the possible community benefits, that could all fall off the table. So that's the biggest risk here.
Okay. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you for your thoughts. I will just leave it here. I see this as a nice political thriller movie, honestly, when I hear you guys. But thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your respect. Mr. Speaker, the Mr. Clerk, the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Sarab Gandhi.
Good evening. You have 5 minutes.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So I just have a question or a clarification I'm seeking from either Mayor Collier or Bruno. And this is in relation to sort of the concessions that we might lose if we go to the tribunal. And I know that we're sort of the argument is centering around the park, but say we were to go to tribunal, is the developer going in with the original plan from 2017 with the 6 buildings, or can they throw a Hail Mary and say, hey, we want actually 10 buildings? So that's the first question I have. The second part of it is how many additional units over that roughly 1350 units could they get? because really it sort of centers around could the density be increased? If not, then I think we're really only talking about a park and sort of ignoring the issues of the density capacity that the residents are concerned about. So we're just saying, hey, let's just get that density capacity, but you'll get a park for it. So if either one of you can answer to that.
That sounds like a Bruno question.
Yep. I'll be happy to answer that. When we're dealing with an appeal at the board, especially one that was filed under the old OMB rules and regulations, anything is up for discussion. Medallion could appear at that hearing and present a proposal that is different than what was initially proposed or the version that we're dealing with today, tonight. So yeah, there could be 10 buildings. There could be a request for additional density beyond what is being proposed today. In the end, it will be left up to the board member to make that decision, whether it's appropriate and good planning. So yeah, it could be much different than what is being discussed here tonight.
Okay, and at the tribunal, is it going to be a similar format where the residents, as I think one of the members, Vijay Shah, possibly mentioned, that they can voice their opinions and be heard at that tribunal, or is this more of a sort of a mandate passed down? So the builder goes or the developer goes to them, says, hey, this is what we want, and they look at the plan and they say, yeah, that's fine, and there's no other considerations taken into place from other concerned parties.
So the case management conference is designed to establish who the parties will be at a future hearing and those that want participatory status to speak at the hearing. So it's not a free-for-all like it is tonight, where you just register and come in and speak to the board member. It's very much structured in a court setting. So there's the possibility of being cross-examined by lawyers. You'll have to present your arguments and be an expert witness and be, recognized as an expert witness by the board member. So it's definitely not in the same sort of structure that we're dealing with the applications tonight.
And for the residents, what kind of representation is available? Is this a self-organized group, or is there support provided through the city, I suppose, is what I'm asking, with the town?
No, that would be a conflict of interest, because we are a party already.
Okay.
If there are similar arguments being made by different parties, yes, those arguments could be made together. But at this stage, if you want to be a participant, you'd have to reach out to the Ontario Land Tribunal and put in your request and appear at the next CMC to get a status of participatory, so that you have the opportunity to speak.
And I believe that that's on October the, did you say
15th.
October 15th.
Thanks for the clarification, Bruno. I have one more question for Mayor Collier. Mayor Collier, you've said that you've received professional advice from your solicitors, and I was wondering if this is a recommendation document that you could make available for a public review. I believe that would be immensely helpful for the residents as well, to see the recommendation for themselves.
Well, thank you for the question. For the solicitor information that is privileged and in camera, that's not something that we can share. I'm actually not even sure that there is a report on it. It was a verbal, but I mean, you are absolutely welcome to seek the same. I just wanted to follow up on what Mr. Scopacasa said. Since our staff are in support of the application, if Ajax Council decided tonight that we were going to vote against our staff recommendations, and we were going to oppose this at the board, like your community group intends to do, we would have to go out ourselves. There's nothing to help us. We would have to go out ourselves and try and find and hire other planners and lawyers to defend us against our own staff, which is kind of an important piece. And I want people to understand that, like, I find that to be a little bit of a ridiculous situation as the mayor to be put in, to make a decision where I would have to hire outside people to testify against our staff in a court setting. And that's kind of the situation that we're in here. So I don't know if that helps answer your question about what resources are available. The answer is there aren't any resources available. You would be responsible, your group would be responsible, as we would be responsible.
Okay, and just for the clarification now, when you say, you know, hundreds and thousands of tax dollars would be, you know, utilized for lawyers and so on, that would be representing sort of the mayor's office, and then the party that forms on its own for the residents, they have to provide for themselves. Just need a clarification on sort of who's using sort of the hundreds and thousands of dollars when we are, say, hiring to go against our own planners and against our own recommendations.
That's an estimate on my behalf, but maybe Mr. Romanowski or Mr. Skopakasa could speak after and clarify. I'm going by, let me give you an example. The appeal that we did against the Durham Live development, that appeal went for a year. It cost us, I think it was almost $200,000 in our own costs, and we lost the appeal. So we have to pay almost $1 million in the other side's costs as well. So it's not just your costs for your people, it's potentially, if you lose, the other side's costs as well, which is again why, as a representative, I don't want to saddle the taxpayers with potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of costs on something that I'm not very confident that we're going to win. So that when I said a couple $100,000, that's an estimate on my part, but looking at the things before, from my experience, is probably a low estimate. But maybe Mr. Romanowski, you could clarify that through the chair.
Yes, through the chair. I would think through the chair to our delegate. Yeah, I would say that would be a low cost. That's not factoring in things like hiring traffic consultants and planners and other things. That might just be the legal fees associated with a hearing, especially if the hearing, you know, we have multiple delegations or multiple parties that want to make delegations or speak to the tribunal. There could be days set aside for those. The hearing could be up to 2 weeks in length, depending on what's determined through the CMC process. Just maybe to just get to the heart of the question, the municipality would not be paying for any support for the residents to obtain legal advice or planners or whatnot. That would be solely the responsibility of the party or group that would be formed and speaking at the tribunal. That wouldn't be something, or there is no assistance that can be provided by the municipality, as it would be an appeal or I guess a delegation that this party wants to make before the tribunal. You'd be responsible for those costs as a group yourselves, from what I understand.
Is there any other questions followed up? Have your questions been answered?
Just one quick question from my first point that just came to mind is just a clarification. The tribunal is going to be making a decision on the density, not necessarily on the exact plans of buildings and whatnot. Is that correct? Or
Yes, that is correct.
okay, so in that scenario, even if we lose these current concessions, when it comes time to building, could we still get those concessions in terms of the park or whatever it is that we want at that point in time?
If I may, through the chair, I think that's been reiterated a few times.
Yeah, I was just
And
going to say that at each time, the site plan, actually, if we disagree with the site plan, they could actually still go back to the what is it called now? LPAD?
OLT.
OLT. They keep changing the name on it. And they could actually fight us on every single one of the site plans.
And just to clarify through the chair to our delegate, and Mr. Skopakis has already said this, because this is these have been appealed under, the OMB, which is the original version of this planning tribunal, and now it's called the OLT. They could bring whatever proposal they want to that hearing and make their case right there on the floor as to, we now support this. We don't want the park. We want 10-story buildings, and we want to increase this a little bit, or do a whole bunch of other things. So I think, just as the mayor has iterated, as planning staff have iterated, at the hearing, when we get there, whenever that date is set, if there aren't certain things that are either agreed upon or issues set aside to discuss, then there could be a whole slew of issues that are then discussed at that tribunal. And the more issues that there are, the longer the hearing will take, which will only increase the costs associated for everybody involved. Will only increase the cost to move through that process.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for all the clarifications to everyone. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you so much for coming out. Mr. Clerk, who is our next speaker?
Our next speaker is Tasso Papas.
Thank you. I kind of got out of control on that last one. So if you have a number of questions, if you could maybe ask all of your questions, and then at the end, we'll get the appropriate, I'll try to write down your questions, and we'll get the appropriate people to actually answer them, if that's okay. You have 5 minutes.
I understand. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I suppose I don't really have questions per se, more just, kind of my analysis and commentary on what's been going on for quite some time. I've lived in the Castle Fields community since the beginning. I'm an original homeowner and live very close, a stone's throw from where the initial development, or at least, Block A is scheduled to be. I'm also, a part of the Castle Fields Residents Association, and, friendly with many of the other people that have come on tonight. And I think, the one thing that for me that is probably the most striking were the comments of Councillor Lee. And the reason I say that is because the line of questioning and comments and the concerns that were clear in his, I guess, in his tone and in what he said, so closely echo what my concerns are. And I think the concerns are of many of the people in this community. And the reason that, and I personally have never spoken to him, and from what I understand, none of our other of the members in our committee have spoken to him. I think the reason they're the same is because we obviously, the answer is obvious. We all live here. And I think if I paint, a backdrop, for just a small example, that goes to the core of what the community issues are, which are traffic and congestion, which obviously dovetails to major concerns that are part of the Medallion proposal, which are obviously their request to change the density of their developments, as well as, to underpark the developments, relative to, what's permissible at the moment. I have 2 young children that I, drive to school every day. They go to a Montessori school in the south of Ajax. And for me, and I think the same goes for people that live on the south side of Rosland in the Sundial community, to leave, pre-COVID, of course, this community, and to get out onto Rosland is extremely difficult, during morning rush hour on Rosland. And this is something I'm sure you guys know and have heard a million times, from Lake Ridge to Harwood, it's bumper to bumper traffic. You can't get out of this community. And the reverse is true in the evening when you're trying to come back, headed eastbound into this community. It can't be done. So immediately, and this has been happening for many years, there's a major pain point, which is it's congested. There's way too much traffic. And, everybody's hope was that at some point the road would be widened, which obviously is being discussed ad nauseum on this call. And then as, a couple of years ago, when the Medallion proposal came to light and people kind of started to, pull together and kind of form groups, I think their proposal really strikes at the heart of what the major concerns were and are after the dust settled. Initially everybody was up in arms about, we were lied to and all the rest of that nonsense. And since then, I think a lot of that has gradually, worked its way out of, what is the reasonable funnel. And I think everybody has, and again, I'm speaking for myself, but, in some ways for what many other people have echoed to me, we all understand that development is probably on the horizon, that this development is real. There needs to be additional density in Ajax and everywhere else in the GTA. That's just kind of the way things work. But when, I think Medallion is trying to push forward a plan that, as I said, going back to density and parking related issues, and we've already got cars all over the road, including on my road on Carberry. The street is littered with cars parked on the road all the time. And we think through, hey, there are going to be a lot more cars here, because I think the assumption that, hey, if there are 350 or 1,300 units as this development moves forward for the next 10, 15 years, assuming they get through all the way through at some point, that all of those people are going to use their bikes. And I personally have been a cyclist since I was a young child, or we're going to try and encourage them to use public transportation. I think, just in layman's terms, is unreasonable. The people that are paying market rent are not going to be working at Amazon, which is amongst the most prolific, low-paying employers on the planet. They are probably going to have, fairly well-paying jobs. Hopefully it's in Ajax. It may not be in Ajax, but they're going to need to commute. So immediately the alarm bells are going off, because we're thinking, hey, there's going to be tremendous congestion on streets that are already congested. I have a tough time, my children, and we're fortunate to have a place up north. I have a tough time allowing my kids, and one of my youngest sons always complains to me that, hey, Dad, you don't let me go outside and ride my bike or play around the roads, because these roads are just too damn busy, to be quite frank. It's a dangerous place to be. And when I completely understand the position that, hey, we are, suggesting that we will allow them to build, apartment block A, and at some point beyond that, in 4 or 5 or 6 years, or whenever that project eventually happens, Rosland will be widened. It'll alleviate congestion. All of the residents are thinking, well, hey, we've already got a major congestion issue. On top of that, we're going to layer on top of that a multi-year high-rise construction project, which is going to make a difficult situation even worse. And that is, a recipe for unpleasant living for a very long time. And again, when we talk about, sorry about that.
I really hate to interrupt you, but you've gone over your 5 minutes. Are you going to wrap up quickly?
I will. I think to distill it down, myself and a lot of the residents that I speak to, I think really what we're looking for is for the council and the mayor to take a position and at least have input, because your position and your votes are obviously important, that reflects the desires and the feelings of the residents that live here, and that saying that, well, there are going to be concessions in section 37, although they haven't been disclosed, and do we want the park or not want the park? The reality is Medallion, they're looking at this as a 10, 15, 20-year horizon. Them scraping one of 6 buildings off just doesn't feel like a huge concession to the people that live here and will have to endure this for 15 or 20 years. And we want, the members on this board to at least voice an opinion that closely, parallels what the people that live in this community, how they clearly feel. And I know you guys have heard it clearly. And I think a lot of people, and you've heard it from the others that have spoken, don't really feel that. They feel like it's being glossed over and there's a bunch of curveballs and we're like, wow, this is the best we can do. And it just doesn't feel, like we're on the same page. And that's really the concern.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure. Okay, Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm trying to figure out how I can make this into a question. I'll try. But thank you, Mr. Pappas, for your delegation. And you heard Councilor Lee asking the questions at the beginning, and you heard me call a point of order. And I just want to assure you that we all share those same concerns that he was talking about and that you appreciated. Just this isn't the time for that right now. We're not at that stage. We are at just the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw stage dealing with density. Those things and those questions about traffic and parking and fire and everything will come. But as you've heard many, many times tonight, if you've been on the whole call, is depending on how this goes at the board, what we see right now may not be what we get. So it doesn't make sense to be talking about parking and traffic when we don't know what the final application is going to be. And so that's why I kind of call that point of order, because we're just not there yet. We all share those. And I hope I didn't come across tonight or at the public open houses as minimizing resident concerns. I think I've said a bunch of times, I absolutely empathize. I absolutely know how important and how much emotion comes into this, because these are people's homes and it's personal. But as I've said, I have to kind of be able to cut through that and focus on the rules that we have to follow. So it's not a question at all. I just wanted to make that statement that I hope you realize that it's not that I'm or anybody's trying to minimize. It's just that time will come to ask those questions, and I will ask those questions, and council will ask those questions. I do always try and be very, very upfront and make sure the residents are fully aware and educated on what we can and cannot do. And that's what I've tried very hard to do tonight. So I hope I'll leave that with you. I hope you realize that.
I did hear that, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody does. And again, back to my further point, I guess we understand what you can and cannot do. Totally get that. Having said that, the concern ultimately is that regardless of the Section 37 concessions and whatever those might be, by council approving subject to the concessions, et cetera, and not objecting to their proposal, it in effect is greasing the rails for Medallion to move forward with the proposal and the change in density and the under parking of the units, which is difficult for both the residents and council itself. It's difficult to change that position a year from now if you kind of give them a pseudo green light now, as it were. That's all I'm saying. And I understand the legal issue. You guys don't want to take on Medallion, and there are complications. Things aren't as they always appear. Totally get that. I think that's kind of really what the main point is I was trying to make.
No, that's a very fair statement. And if this was something that was outside of what was allowable, and there was the thought that we could be successful, it doesn't matter who the developer is. We've taken on much bigger than Medallion before.
Is there going to be a question? Is there going to be a question?
There's not going to be a question. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. Likewise.
Do we have a question at all for this speaker? No. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, who is our next speaker?
Madam Chair, that concludes our speakers list, and a reminder for those in attendance that council's procedures do not allow for repeat delegation.
Do we have the opportunity to ask if anybody that is online right now might have a question? Could they put their hand up at this point?
Yes, if Madam Chair would like to make last call for anyone to raise their hand to make a delegation tonight, this would be the time.
Okay, so this would be our last call. If you've been on the call the whole time and you didn't get a chance to ask a question, you have an opportunity now. We'll wait for a couple of minutes and use the raised hand icon, and we'll take your question now only if you haven't already spoken. And I'm not seeing anybody. Mr. Clerk, are you the same?
Madam Chair, we don't have anyone else at this point, so you may conclude the public meeting portion of tonight's agenda.
Okay, I am going to conclude it at this point. I believe now is the opportunity for the proponent to have an opportunity to speak. Is that correct, if they want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening,
For your patience.
Mrs. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. To address the matter at hand, Medallion has reviewed the staff report along with our consulting team, and we agree with the planning and the technical review contained in the document. We also agree with the staff recommendations with respect to the proposal, its built form, and related technical aspects. We do look forward to further discussions regarding Medallion's contributions to community benefits under the Section 37 of the Planning Act. And we do believe that there is an appropriate range of community benefits that bear a proximate relationship with the proposal and will benefit both the new and the existing members of the community. And on that note, I would just like to say that we look forward to the continued dialogue with staff in the town on the application. And we thank you again for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you. Mayor Collier, I have on the speakers list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Anna, for coming today. A couple of questions about timeline to start. Should this go ahead and Medallion and the town enter into minutes of settlement and there not be a hearing, when would Medallion expect to start construction?
Well, subject to, like you said, the approvals, ideally, it's still a process. As you know, we still have to go through site plan and building permit. From our perspective, it would probably be at least another year and a half, probably maybe 2 years before we would actually see something in the first phase occur if it does get approved, but best guess would be 1.5 years.
Okay, and for building A, how long till that would be complete approximately if you start from start to finish? Is that a year or 2 year project?
If we were to start with building A first, I would imagine that that would be at least an 18 to 20 month construction.
Okay, so let's give it 2 years. What is your time frame for buildings B, C, D, and E if this were approved?
In terms of the length of construction, or do you mean in terms of when we would start?
And well, I'm trying to ascertain the timeline from start to finish of the development, because we've heard some resident concerns about dust and
for sure. So we as a builder obviously have to adhere to the bylaws, and we're in touch with the town with regards to making sure we have the proper construction management plan in place, as well as a dust control measures. And that's constantly reviewed and monitored by the town as we go through construction. But in terms of the actual timeline, I would, as I've said before, it typically takes about 2 years to build a building. In this particular case, we would start with one building that's 357 units, and then we would then proceed to the second building once we know that the proposed road widening was more secure. And then we would allow us to start building the second one. So, I mean, this is, I would say, a 2 year exercise per building, depending on how the market goes as well. But that would be the best guess at this point.
Okay. I want to talk a bit about the Section 37 community benefits, because I feel this is a pretty important piece, and one that I want to make sure is completely vetted and agreed to before I'm willing to make a decision on this matter. So you've been discussing, and I heard that it would require minutes of settlement to be entered into. Is there anything particular about what you've been discussing that Medallion has an issue with, or what is the holdup? Why isn't Medallion able to enter into an agreement now with the town?
Through you, Mrs. Chair, we recently started the discussions regarding Section 37. We've seen the list that was presented to us, and like you said, it is a process that requires a lot of thought and discussion, and we just started the discussion, so it's going to take at least a few weeks for us to digest it and also continue our discussions with town staff to understand what town staff is asking for, as well as understanding from our perspective what is the best contribution for the proposal as well as for the community benefits.
Do you feel that you will be in a position that negotiations will put you in a position where you'll be able to sign an agreement before the October 15th?
At this time, all I can say is that we'll do our best and put our best foot forward to try to start and finish the negotiations as soon as possible. But if we have to try to work to the October 15th, we'll do our best. It does take time between staff and us, but we will endeavor to do that.
Okay. Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
Regional Councillor Dyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question regarding the types of units that were in the report. The majority were for 1 bedroom. There were, I think, just 300, basically 2 bedroom. And I understand townhouses were anticipated to have 2 and 3 bedrooms. In a community like Ajax, you know, I mean, high rises are being built across the region and other regions as well, and I understand that. So more and more people for affordability are moving into high rises. They don't have down payments for homes. So this is an opportunity for them to live somewhere as a family, and as a family you want to grow. And I'm wondering why, or if you had considered putting more 3-bedroom apartments units in the high rises to accommodate family growth so that they will stay longer in a community.
For you, Madam Chair. The mix that you see there is our best guess right now in terms of what we see as market, being able to market the suites with the split that we've shown. We do anticipate that the townhouses would provide for the 2 or 3 bedroom units. But as we move forward through the application, we can look at and evaluate the market at that time to see if there is a need for additional 3 bedrooms. But we do see right now that the 2 bedrooms and the 1 bedrooms are what we're seeing as the desired mix right now, but it could change as we progress through the application process for site plan and building permit.
I would appreciate that if you take a look at it and maybe provide our staff with a little bit of information on any research you've done on that. I'm curious to know what the trends are and what the needs are going to be in the future, because like I say, it'd be nice to have people who will rent and stay for a lifetime like they do in many other countries. So thank you for that.
Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to Medallion. Approximately when was the decision made to go? I know, by the way, I was at all the open houses. We've met on a few occasions. This is for anyone who's maybe just tuning in just for the decision. So just for information's sake, when did the strategy go from the townhouses, which, you know, the residents have shown pictures of, to these rental units?
For you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Lee. So as if you heard what I've said previously at the open houses, and my comment remains the same, such that it was never Medallion's intent to mislead the purchasers. I've said that before. Back in 2000, the local planning context and the subject lands have since evolved. And so as you could see, and as you hear on the news, and as you see through all government planning policies that are changing to encourage high density along higher density form of roads such as Rosland Road. So we made the choice to, as anyone who owns land, to apply for a change on our land. And we are looking for a more intensive use that is more optimal and efficient use of land for this current state and for the ability to maximize the infrastructure and services that are there. We feel that the higher density is the desirable form for this land right now.
And can you give me just even a ballpark year? Was it like 2013, 14, 15, 16?
To be quite honest with you, from what I don't know the exact dates. I know that it was, from what I've heard, was that in 2008 or earlier that residents were shown this plan that showed that there was potential opportunity for townhouses. And then since then, as we always look at different land uses for the property. So I don't have the exact date of when it transitioned, but I know that certainly was not the intent to mislead anyone on what we were proposing. And it was, like I said, an evolution in terms of what we were planning on the lands. And that's how we ended up where we are today.
No, and I completely appreciate that. And this is by no means any sort of gotcha types of questions. I just want to really want to get everything clarified.
Absolutely. No,
Ultimately,
absolutely.
outside of a public open house, though, you never, Medallion would never take the opportunity to pre-notify residents of, hey, like we've shifted our focus, we've shifted our, the plan, and this is what's going to come, just to give you a heads up. Like that wouldn't be something
No.
Medallion would do.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Lee. Typically, that's the application process is that process that we go through when there is a change in lands, like anyone on their property. That this is the process that we don't typically go around and advise everyone what, just like someone who's building, a bad example. If someone's making a change on their home, they go through the minor variance process and their neighborhood gets made aware of the same thing. We're going through the Planning Act, and this process is what's given, and we're following the rules to advise of how we're changing the lands.
Okay. From the open house, which I think was the summer, COVID's now blended everything together, but it was a few months ago, to the final application that is now before us. Were there any changes that you can point out and be like, after the public feedback, this is specifically what I changed or what we changed because we heard you guys loud and clear?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask for Scott Waterhouse, our planning consultant, if he's on the line, to perhaps review some of the changes we've done since our application and the reiteration that we're at now.
And I'm so sorry. And I don't want to waste anybody's time. More specifically, from the time we had the open house, when like the first kind of final draft to the actual draft that's in front of us, I just want to know if there are any changes based on public feedback.
Well, the feedback we've received is in conjunction with what we received from the town. So one of the major concessions or requests was for a 1 hectare park, which one may consider significant in a landowner's eyes, and also providing for a huge benefit to the community because you're providing for what is, we've been told, is a need in the surrounding community. So that is a concession or a desirable outcome of the plan that we have now.
But that was also presented at the open house, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was the first submission we've ever made did not include the 1 hectare park. It was done subsequent to.
Subsequent from the 3 virtual open houses we had.
Oh, sorry. That was from the first open house to the second.
Right, sorry, yeah. So I mean specifically from the 3 when we had like, 100 residents per.
So subsequent
Councillor Lee, sorry, Anna, Councillor Lee, if I may, I tried to start my video, everyone, apologies, Scott Waterhouse with GHD. Yes, to the question through the chair, you're correct. At the January open houses, the plan that was shown at that time did have the 1 hectare park. And so since that time, the most recent submission, probably the main change was a reduction in units from what was shown in January. At that time in January, I believe the plan had 1,322 units. It's now down to 1,104. So there's been a slight reduction, and that's been a reduction in Block A, in the apartment building in Block A. There have been other minor changes in terms of the mixed use building in Block E has been shifted closer to Rosland Road, primarily based on comments from staff to ensure that what Bruno referenced previously, but a 45-degree angular plane profile could be met. That wasn't previously. So that change was made to kind of give a bit more separation between the mixed use building in Block E and those existing residents on the south side of Whitlock Crescent there. There were other, I want to say minor tweaks, but other design revisions in response to town staff comments on internal roads and parking ramp location. But those are what I'll say the key changes since the material presented in January at the open houses.
Thank you. That's actually incredibly informative. It's to the mayor, I'm not sure I can make this a question, but I think part of the frustration from the residents is this process where they express the frustrations, they express their concerns, you know, and ultimately from January to now, you know, we've had a few, I'll call them minor changes, and I'm sure they're major to Medallion going down, you know, 18 units. But I think like it just, the frustration's palpable, and it just feels like we're not being heard, and it's the developers going through the motions. Now, Medallion has a very good reputation. We've worked with the town before. I just can only express from this specific application what the residents and myself can feel. Now, we're not supposed to go into site plan application approval, but the question I do want to ask is, as far as you know, how many times has Medallion gone to an OMB, LPAT, or OLT in regards to site plan approval? I guess the question ultimately is, are we going to set ourselves up for another 12 rounds on down the line?
Through you, Madam Chair. We actually, not sure how it's relevant in terms of understanding how this application is going forward for with the site plan in terms of our history on applications, because I actually don't have the number for you if we even have gone to the LPAT for this, but I can tell you that our objective as a land developer and as a builder is to try to avoid going to the LPAT and try to work with staff and council to get an application that's desirable. So I don't have the figure for you, but our objective is not to try to continue with a long process in terms of approvals.
Yeah, and I apologize. Just the question had popped up when Bruno had mentioned that in theory you could, and we don't want to keep doing this, whether it's from the resident or the council or the planning staff side. Those are all my questions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other council member have a question for the proponent? If not, I think we have reached the point where we have a motion on the floor. And I sincerely hope you're not going to ask me to read this entire motion. We all see the motion. Mr. Clerk, could you put it up there? If you want me to read it, I'll read it, but it ain't going to be pretty. Mr. Mayor?
I don't see a mover and a seconder, so this is not.
I haven't even asked yet, so.
I had a motion to make, but I can't move it and then make that motion.
Okay, I haven't even asked for it. I think we're just reading the motion. Is that correct? Do I have a mover and a seconder for this motion? I don't have a mover and seconder.
Well, maybe I can ask the clerk, Madam Chair. I don't mind moving it, but I intend to move to bring forward a referral motion. So can I still move it and bring forward a referral
Hang on, I think Councillor Dice, did you have your hand up to move?
Yes, I did get the motion on the floor. So we can speak.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it to put it on the floor, Madam Chair. I hope I'm not putting myself offside with what I want to do.
Okay,
no, that's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, we need, this would be questions to the motion only, okay? Regional Councillor Lee?
And comments too, correct?
Yeah.
Before it's referred, and if the referral motion is coming. Before, if this is referred, I just hope that the clerk can explain what that means. But before that's even happening, I just wanted to kind of conclude, if I may, of just, listen, a few hours ago, the mayor made a very good point of order in terms of this is not about site plan application. This is about, densities. But it's like, how can I talk about density and how it affects my residents without talking about traffic, safety, parking, and when we're talking about quadrupling density in this case? Just to council, you've heard this a few times. We don't have to do any of this. Everyone's talking about maximums as if it's the max or bust, and I don't think we are necessarily bound to that. I think we have within our authority to set lower densities that are higher than 185, but may not be 660. Well, higher than 75 from block B to D, but not 317. And and again, it's in the report of reducing parking spots from 1.5 spots to 1 spots. Each and every one of us have been dealing with our updated parking bylaw, and we understand parking is at a premium. And I know we're not there yet, but that's in the report of what's going to be asked. And that's why I just want to make sure this is addressed. Is it anybody's fault we are at this OLT? No, possibly this provincial government and their, decision to just push through everything. But, another reason I disagree with this is that by pushing through this, it's removed really my ability to object to this in a timely manner. Like we've had other applications where we took a month, we heard all the stats and we needed more time, more public consultations. And then the next month we dealt with it. Unfortunately, we are at this made up time crunch and that's being removed. So, I mean, that's incredibly frustrating. The planners, mentioned the provincial policy statement, and under 1.4.3, and I read this, it states that authorities shall provide for an appropriate range and mix of housing options and densities to meet projected market-based and affordable housing needs of current and future residents. So I get we're possibly doing a lot for future residents, but you have current residents imploring you to not do this. Will this cost money? Yes. Will this be a fight? Yes. But to the mayor's point, we did it with Durham Live. We've done it with Algae. We've had fights before. Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. But it's a principle for me. And we read the packet. There is a petition of over 700 residents that say this does not meet their needs. And I can even go beyond just speaking to these residents. There's no one in Ward 2 who's reached out to me or spoken to me when I brought this up saying, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Whether it's a dad at daycare or people I meet at restaurants, people I meet throughout my travels, no one thinks this is a good idea. So this isn't necessarily just NIMBY of this Castlefields development. My old neighborhood of Tansley, I would bring it up to old neighbors and they also think, they're just like, well, why would you put that there? So I hope Ward 2 could be reflected of just, it's an uphill climb. I spoke to the lawyer as well, who said it's absolutely an uphill climb. But I mean, there's a condo in Kingston where it seemed like the developer was, they lost, so to speak, at the OLT and had to adjust their thing. I'm going to be told it's apples to oranges. It's a very different development, but it's not impossible to win appeals at these things. Otherwise, why have them if it's a foregone conclusion? So leave it to that. I'll implore to you of just, you are affecting countless residents who are looking to us to make a decision that works for them as well as the future. And I hope we can reflect our vote in that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am the councillor for Mr. Mayor. Did you want to speak or after me?
I thought she had acknowledged the chair had acknowledged my hand. I just want to make sure she saw it. That's all.
Oh, okay.
I was just letting the two reps for the area speak first.
Thank you. Thank you. As a local councillor for that area, I live in the Imagination community, and over the summer, I choose to ride my bicycle every morning as much as I can, the weather permits. And I ride through Castle Fields and Sundial because it's a beautiful neighborhood. It's lovely, and I really enjoy it. And I've seen the way the community has worked together to keep it pristine. And I can totally understand what the protection is about for the community. And as much as I've listened to all the delegations tonight and staff and proponents, I understand this can also be good for Ajax. But there still seem to be so many unknowns and not enough community education on this project. Look, I don't have all the answers, but as we can see, there is not enough community support for this project. My constituents have not been satisfied with the information they've been given. And in this case, I just want to make myself clear where I stand. I will support my constituents and their concerns on this. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Collier?
Madam Chair, I have a motion that I've sent to the clerk that I would be looking for a seconder. Maybe they can put it on the screen. Fairly simple. Looking for a seconder to refer this to the council meeting coming up on September the 20th. Oh, I thought I put September 21st, 2021. I see Councillor Bauer's hand.
Sorry. Okay. So the
Thank
second.
you. I would like to speak to it. Thank you, Councillor Bauer, for seconding. That's why I didn't ask a lot of questions to the developer when they were up, because I decided I was going to refer this because I feel that I'm incredibly frustrated that this is at the board, and really the decision taken out of our hands. I'm extremely frustrated with that. I've heard what the residents have said, and I feel that if we're going to make a decision, I want to make sure that we have everything out on the table. And that includes the Section 37 expenses, community benefits, put in writing as part of the minutes of settlement before this goes to the board. I'm not buying into an October 15th deadline, because that's just a conference. That's a case management conference. That at that meeting, they'll identify the parties and they'll set a date and decide how long the board needs to sit. But that's not a deadline that I'm worried about right now. I want to make sure, I want both parties, the town and Medallion, to go back to the table. I want them to hammer this out, and I want to see this in writing so I can say to the residents, I've heard everything you said. I absolutely understand and respect why Councillors Khan and Lee have to take the position they're taking. I also respect the residents, but I respect all the residents of Ajax, not just Ward 2, with all respect to everybody. And I can't saddle the rest of the other 132,000 residents that I represent with hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees for an unwinnable appeal. And it's not just residents of Castlefield that will use this park and will benefit from these community benefits. It's all residents of Ajax. So this is a much bigger picture that I have to look at as head of this council. And I want to make sure that if I'm going to support this, that we've got everything in line. So by referring this, and I also put two things in there, two traffic measures that I think should form part of these Section 37s as well. And that being the traffic signal at Rosland Hilton Gate and the pedestrian crossings, because several of the residents did mention the traffic and the safety and those other things. And I think those will be vetted through site plan, but I think we want to make sure that those are going to be part of this proposal from the start, from the minutes, and the developer is going to pay for them as part of this development, because I'm not going to benefit from this development. Nobody here is going to benefit from this development. They're going to benefit from this development financially. And we need to make sure, and I'm trying to make sure, that residents are protected. I don't expect residents to like it, but this is not a winnable case if that was the outcome we're trying to do, because I've never, in all the developments I've done over the last 18 years or made decisions on, ever once had neighboring residents support a development as going in beside their house. It just doesn't happen. but we have to try and make the best of it. And I got to make sure that these are in place. So I won't speak any more about this. I'll save my comments about the whole thing for the 21st, and hopefully we can move on it. If for some reason they're not there yet, then maybe we'll refer it again. I think we shouldn't be making a decision on this tonight with the information with that blank still a blank. I want that filled in. I want that information verified and agreed to by both parties before I'm going to put my name on it. So I'll leave it there. I'll ask for a recorded vote too, please, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clerk, could you please explain for any of the community members that are on still what this process, what's happening now? Can you just explain that?
Sure, Madam Chair. So what would happen is this item would go forward to the council meeting on September 21st for decision. And technically speaking, from a governance or decision-making perspective, the implication of that is quite minimal. It would be put forward on September 21st, which is the meeting where a decision arising from this CAT meeting would have been ratified and made official anyway. So the impact would really just be, as the mayor has indicated, that it would give staff a couple of extra weeks to pursue the instructions that are contained within the motion, and then council could potentially be making a decision at a time when it is in possession of more information about the progress of those Section 37 benefit discussions.
So one other clarification, at that council meeting, there, what is the role of the public at that council meeting with regards to this this motion?
Sure, that's a great question. So council's rules of procedure would preclude anyone from delegating again on this matter at a council meeting, essentially sort of, I mean, to put it in not a great way, taking a second kick at the can. The public meeting took place tonight. This was the opportunity for residents to make their views known, and that public meeting would not be repeated in the context of council on September 21st.
So given that we do have a public question period time in council, is that allowed then?
So a question period permits people to ask questions about items that might be on the agenda, but there's a section of the procedure bylaw that specifically precludes somebody from coming to delegate on a matter that was previously the subject of a public meeting at CAP and has not yet been decided from council. So that would be out of order.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, are there any questions to the, are we allowed to ask questions to deferral? I always get this mixed up with the region.
There's direction, so yes.
Okay. Any questions to this motion? And I believe if none, I don't see any questions. So it's a recorded vote, Madam Clerk.
On the motion, in favor or opposed, Mayor Collier?
Favor.
Councillor Bauer?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dyes?
In favor.
Councillor Khan?
Opposed.
Regional Councillor Lee?
I'm in favor.
Councillor Tyler Morin?
In favor.
Chair Crawford?
In favor. So that motion passes. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank actually all of the residents for coming out. I want to thank you for the respectful way that you approached council. I thought it was a good decision, a good discussion. This deferral will allow for a little bit more time for those for that Section 37. We're at the point now where it's a motion to adjourn, I believe. Councillor Bauer, Councillor Robert, Tyler Morin, all in favor. And that is unanimous.